Yeah. So item 4, Pledge of Allegiance, please join me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Roll call.
Director Borstein?
Yes, ma'am.
Director Silla? Here. Director Meigs?
Here.
Director Yeager?
Here.
Director Gaffney?
Here, thank you. Now we report on the action taken by the board. We've given direction to staff, we have no other reportable action. And we'd like to right now adjourn as the Ross Valley Sanitary District Board, and we reconvene as the Ross Valley Public Financing Authority Board, which is a vehicle used for financing, it's a joint powers agency, and we have some cleanup matters to deal with. Okay?
I will just do a real brief introduction to this. You're acting as the Ross Valley Financing Authority, basically just to adopt a policy that is committing the district to all the best practices for ongoing compliance reporting. And the need for this was brought to our attention by bond counsel due to some relatively new requirements. So ideally, if we had our process just perfect, we would have taken care of this when we did your final action on the bond itself, but we're bringing it back to you to get it done before the end of this calendar year. Sean Tierney, bond counsel, is here, as is senior staff. We did review this matter with the finance committee also this month. It's a fairly straightforward explanation in the staff report, so that's all I have, and then again, Sean is here to answer questions.
Maybe a brief explanation.
Yeah, you're happy to. Want me to do that now?
Yeah, for the public, we did sell about $30 million worth of bonds to finance facilities, and we sold at 3.54%. And our credit has been upgraded about 6 months ago to A+. So we're making progress here as a district.
That's a 25-year bond.
It's a 25-year bond. Yes.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
Very
you.
good result.
And it was a competitive sale.
Yeah,
It is.
it worked very well.
Yes. With that.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Sean Tierney, Hawkinsdale Appeal, your bond counsel for the issue, and this is a work product of our tax department, and what's before you is adoption of procedures for the compliance with the tax law, and it's a summary of. It doesn't add anything new to your obligations. It's a summary of what those obligations are under the tax law, and combined with the actions we took, and a summary of the covenants that are already described in the tax certificate. But I think it's a helpful document. It touches on the key things to keep in mind going forward with respect to the tax law and the bonds, and it applies. You shouldn't make any distinctions between the authority and the district. Really, it's, as you know, the authority is really a part of the district and has only a sort of a legal existence. But it is the issuer that for certain purposes, district staff will sign in capacity of the authority. So I think it's fine to have the authority board approve it, but just keep in mind that it applies to both entities, which are really the same entities. So I encourage everyone to read it and call us with questions. But it's really a summary of all the things we've been explaining, and I think it's helpful. There is a form, the 8838 tax return, that's filed at the end of the bond issue, which hasn't been filed yet because you have till the end of the quarter. There's a box that asks whether you've adopted procedures, because it's strongly encouraged by the IRS in recent years, and they ask about it. So upon adoption of this, you'll be able to check that box that you've done this, so it looks good.
Is this in addition to continuing disclosure?
Well, that's a separate issue, and we could, there are procedures for that as well,
Yeah.
and we can work on that.
So we have to do this for the district, and we have to do it for the financing authority. They're kind of one and the same thing. And so,
So each time, is that one quick, so each time we do any kind of a bonding issuance, we need to do this? Because we've done one of
Well,
these, we've
this
done
is-
one or two of these
Yeah,
before.
this one's pretty generic.
Uh-huh.
I think we would probably look at it just to make sure it's still up to date on it if we did a subsequent bond issue, but it's intended to apply to any tax exempt obligation you would do. So it may not need, you may not need another one if you did.
well,
And, excuse, are you an attorney?
Yeah,
Okay. That's
I'm your
all.
bond attorney.
Okay.
Yeah.
we probably didn't do one years ago for the other bond issue.
We did one
Well,
for the refi.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know that the
No, we did one
requirements.
when Marcia was,
Oh, way
yeah,
back,
Marcia
okay.
Johnson.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know why, but there's some, that's why I'm trying to recall it.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's something we've just done as part of our services, and we could look into doing one for continuing disclosure, because we have some forms that probably would be pretty easy
Yeah.
to, at least give you a form, and, we need a little help for you to review it and fill it out. That's a good idea too, because the SEC.
Whenever a public agency issues a bond, which we did, the IRS, and because it's tax exempt, they require us to submit ongoing information for the secondary market of bond sales. So that's being much more enforced than it has been in the past, and probably this is part of that as well. We're actually in favor of it. Any other comments from the board?
A couple questions.
Oh, please.
We have about $17 million outstanding now in bonds. Should we have you be the bond counsel for those bonds also? I don't think we did something like this for the 17 million. We might have, but I don't think that's
I
what
thought we did, but I can't
You think we did?
remember.
Well, I think
Can
in
we
fact,
consolidate the two bonds under one council? Is that, do we create a problem for ourselves?
No, you don't. I mean,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, I think if you have questions about that issue, you can call us. Because we have the same expertise that they do, and that's, I guess, what I would have expected. But when we would reach out to them if there was something we needed to ask about.
They would help.
Are we paying you monthly as bond counsel? or
No,
lump sum?
not at this, no.
A lump sum?
Yeah, for us, we're happy to help with the bond issue and for questions and then the normal course. If something significant comes up, it would take a significant amount of time, then we might talk to you about, being engaged to do that.
And then the second question has to do with page 1 of the procedures for post-issuance compliance. Under general procedures, A, a responsible
Page
official.
2?
Under general procedures, under A,
Hey, okay.
it said, a responsible official. The general manager of the issuer is the responsible official and will identify such officers and employees who were responsible for each of the procedures. So basically, we've delegated to our general manager the title responsible official, and then he's in turn going to delegate it to some other employee. Do you think we ought to have maybe just a one-liner that would say, it will identify such officers and employees with concurrence of the board, so that we all know who these other employees are? They're going to be carrying out the duties of the responsible official.
I think our plan is to hold the general manager responsible for getting all of this out, and if he has helpers,
Do I know, I mean, the only thing I would comment on is that the IRS does want someone to be responsible.
Okay.
Underneath that, I mean, for delegation underneath that, I think it's your call.
Let's ask Rick, what do you think, Rick? How's that?
Well, I definitely would defer to Sean's advice on this because of the obviously the legal nature of it. I interpret it as, yeah, basically, you have to have some title in the organization that is the responsible official, and then that person is responsible for making sure these compliance activities get done and delegating staff to do those in our case. I certainly wouldn't have any concerns with your suggestion, Craig, if there was a way to word it in a fashion that met, I think what Sean's point is, you don't want to muddy the waters on the clear definition of responsible official, because that's a role that they want stated very clearly in the document. So if you wanted to say something like, it would be, I guess, the second, it would be a second sentence in the paragraph that can say something like, the general manager shall, whether periodically advise the board of these appointments or these delegated responsibilities, something to that effect. It'd be one sentence
Sure.
that says, in carrying out my duties, you guys are aware of who's doing what. Does that work, Sean, for your, in your view? Okay.
Were you done, Craig?
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions on page 3. On the bottom at B, there's a blank space for the cash flow obligations to issue. Do we need a figure in there or not? How do we do this?
Where's not seniors?
Does that mean that we need to put in the cash amount, or is that just a line?
That's a line above the footnote.
Okay, so never mind. Then on the the attachment A, the date on there says the meeting was held on the 15th day of October 2014. Aren't we supposed to put today's date or what? At the very bottom, right before the eyes and the nose. It says 15th day of October 2014. Is that on
It's the resolution, she's talking about the resolution.
Isn't
Yes,
that
it's a wrong
date
date.
today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that on the bottom or so?
No, this resolution, that should have this date, I would say.
Okay, so,
Okay, you got it.
that's all I have.
It says that we have to expend these monies within 3 years. We're in one of the wettest years we've seen in a while. What if we have a few consecutive really wet years and we just can't get out there and tear up streets and we're delayed a year in implementing all of it? Is there any kind of penalty that? The wording
No,
was
it's probably okay. I mean, the key thing is reasonably expecting that you could spend it in 3 years, so you're not intending to borrow more than you can spend in that period.
Okay.
And I think that could be demonstrated, particularly when you couldn't have predicted the weather. And there's no specific penalty. I mean, there can be, you're earning arbitrage. I mean, there are complex things that can happen, but the simple answer is no, there's no penalty.
Okay, any comments from the public? It's kind of a technical correction issue here, but if you have comments, would be happy to hear them. Okay, thank you. Hearing none, back to the board. We need a motion here.
I motion that we adopt resolution number 14-0004, adopting a procedure for bond postation, federal tax law compliance, changing the date on the bottom of attachment A to today's date, November 17, 2014. And under general procedures, number 1A, ask that the general manager report back to us as, who is going to be the staff below him that's going to be the responsible staff for doing the below 1 to however many there are items.
I'll second it.
Second. Any further comment? All in favor?
Roll
I need a roll call.
Roll call.
Worsting,
Yes?
Scylla,
Yes.
Meigs,
Aye.
Egger,
Aye.
Gaffney.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to adjourn the Ross Valley Public Finance Authority meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sean.
And reconvene as the Ross Valley Sanitary District Board. And now we can go to item 8, approval of agenda. And what we would like to do here is, for people in the audience, we can move agenda items around. Okay, what agenda items are people interested in? 17 is the property, how many people are interested?
17.
Okay. We can move that one up. What else, anything?
14.
14 laterals. Okay, so why don't we move 14 and 17, I would like to move them after 9, is that okay?
We have the auditor here too.
Okay. And we'll take the auditor, you get to listen to a lot of this, Mr. Auditor. Where is that one?
That's
13.
13. So we'll do a 14, 17, 13. Okay, and is that okay with everybody? Any other? You'll be okay, yeah. So now it's open time for the public, and if any person in the public would like to comment on items that are not on the agenda, now's the time. Seeing none, thank you. We can move on to item 14, consideration of adopting ordinance number 69, an ordinance of sanitary district number 1, Marin County, modifying the portions of ordinance 66 regulating the maintenance.
Point of order, we actually need to take a vote to approve the agenda.
Okay. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda as noted.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for the help. Okay, item 14, again, it's the sewer lateral discussion. Item 14. Greg, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. So what the board has before you this evening is consideration of approving a new ordinance. It's ordinance number 69, and it's, what its purpose is to update a very specific portion of what we generally refer to as the lateral ordinance, which was passed, the majority of that ordinance is in its original form in ordinance number 66. So just to recap very briefly, the board adopted a comprehensive lateral ordinance in ordinance number 66. And you did that with a recognition at the time that based on what we were hearing from other districts, because this is a relatively new and it's a process that can definitely get complicated in the real world, that we should expect to come back with some periodic updates to you, and that is how this has played out. So right off the bat, the district began working with a working group with Marin Association of Realtors to start identifying any of those sort of practical concerns and potential improvements or revisions. And two of those have already been taken care of in past ordinances to amend or update 66. You did these in pretty short order. Basically, one extended the effective date of the property transfer provision so the working group could meet and begin its process. And then the second one was very specific. It was did two things. It moved the effective date for the property transfer provisions, the property sale provisions, out to January 1st. And it also added a revision to allow repairs or replacement under those circumstances to be completed 30 days after the close of escrow. And the purpose of that amendment or change was to make sure or minimize the risk of any interference with the business process and the closing of the property transition process. So the group has continued to have discussions on and off, and I know there's been other communications with the board on a variety of concerns with details of the ordinance. And the one that this is addressing this evening is a very specific one. And it has to do with the timing of what's called the pressure test for the lateral under the provisions of a property sale. And the current wording is fairly simple. It just says, you know, upon initiating the sale, there needs to be demonstration of a successful pressure test. And what was brought to our attention through the discussions was that that seemed to imply you had to go do a pressure test right away. A lot of older, poor condition laterals would likely fail. Then you do an inspection and fix it or replace it, then come back and do a pressure test as part of the final permit sign-offs. So you would end up doing, under some circumstances, foreseeably 2 of these, spending extra time and money to no intended benefit. So what this amendment or change does is it adds language that makes it very clear that if you're acting under these provisions of the ordinance, you're encouraged to go get and complete a voluntary optional inspection so that you, which is much less expensive and can help you identify whether or not you need, it's obvious you need repairs or you need replacement. And then the owner can go make that decision and take those steps before they attempt to complete a successful pressure test to close out the permit. There's just some minor wording updates elsewhere in this. They're just that, very minor. The primary change is this clarifying language that makes it clear that you can take those steps and not inadvertently complete 2 pressure tests.
And we didn't think we had to, that you had to do an initial pressure test.
No, I mean, staff's view was, we certainly, to be clear, we never intended it to be that way. It was, obviously, you know, you can read it different ways, and that's the importance of sort of the real world test is, hey, this is gonna be used by a lot of people, does it make sense? So these provisions for this type of process, where you do go get an inspection first, and then you assess whether you should replace or repair, and then you come back after doing the work for the final pressure test. That's very standard approach as far as we know in other programs. So that's what you have before you. I know we've got representatives of the Marin Association of Realtors here this evening, and staff to answer any questions. And with that,
So in essence, it's just cleaning up some language in our ordinance.
yes.
Okay.
So I have are you done?
Yes.
I have a question. What is the cost if you do it voluntarily as opposed to point of sale? Is there a big difference?
Well, the cost
And
we're talking about.
why would there be a difference?
We're talking specifically about the cost to conduct a pressure test. And the numbers I've heard, and I would sort of defer to others because I'm not as close to the action on all of this, is right about, those can be about $1,000 to conduct a pressure test. So the inspection, you could get that done for, you know, anywhere between $100 to $200.
TV inspection.
Right, CCTV, and then you would know, you'd have a pretty good indication of whether or not you have any chance of a successful pressure test. And if you don't, you now have the option, obviously, to go and act on that information and work with a contractor to get your lateral improved, and then come back and say, okay, now I'm ready for a successful pressure test, and undertake that.
And this is kind of the standard that's going throughout the communities for lateral programs. Is the standard we've picked to do this ordinance?
Well,
Looking at the East Bay.
Yeah,
and
the general trend, I think
Yeah.
it's very clear to say is yes, these types of programs are more and more common in the industry. They do vary in their details, for sure, depending on the community needs and circumstances. So you can kind of take that case only so far, and then they do have differences.
And people that do pressure tests are who?
Licensed contractors, in my understanding, mostly your similar specialized plumbing contractors. We have heard concerns, just as an aside, about the number of resources in the community to help provide those services when they're needed by the customers. We're definitely taking steps to try and meet that. We can only encourage it, but it is something we're aware of.
And at the end of the day, after you've had your lateral repaired or replaced, as part of the general contracting process, a pressure test would then be necessary at the end of the process in order to sign off. And that
Right.
gives us the confidence that, because we may be
Right.
paying for half of the replacement,
Right.
that gives us the okay to go ahead and close that out and pay whatever grant fee.
Well, that would be in the case of that, but, so this, anytime you're closing out that final lateral permit that shows it was properly inspected and tested, under the ordinance requirements, the pressure test is the final kind of universal quality control step on that, to make sure the lateral is generally watertight, water not going either direction, either into the pipe or out of the pipe.
Is there,
Um, Yeah.
so how many years, I mean, is there like, once this is done, and let's say, is there like so many years out that they need to retest it? I'm sorry, I just didn't get
No, so
enough
the
information.
ordinance is pretty straightforward on that. You, again, and these are relatively similar to other programs. Let's say you sell the house, or for any other reason, you go get this completed, you get a lateral replacement completed. You maintain those records, and the district maintains the permit record. You don't have to do the pressure test for, I believe it's 20 years
Okay.
after you do this. And I'm pretty sure it's 20 years.
Thank you.
Okay, any more comments from the board?
A question before we go to the public. So on this pressure test, and in the ordinance, it talks about testing by plugging and filling with water or compressed air. Doesn't say pressure test, but it explains what it is.
Right.
That's what that is, a pressure test.
Correct.
Okay, so if you're gonna sell your home, and you have the lateral inspection, the CCTV, crew comes out, they televise it, it's perfect, you don't need any work, you still need a pressure test?
If it is a property sale portion of the ordinance, yes. If you haven't had a successful one that you've documented, you still need to conduct one to show that, again, it's the final quality control step on the condition of the lateral.
So even though you've had no work and received no district funds as part of a grant for a lateral replacement, you still need,
Right, I think we're mixing up Michael's comment. It was also, so this ordinance has nothing to do with the standing grant program. I mean, obviously they're related, but we're talking about conditions, these are ordinance conditions that apply black and white across the board for all properties in the district. This has nothing directly to do, there's obviously some topical overlap, but this is completely separate from the grant requirements in the grant program. Yeah.
okay, so if you're gonna sell a home, you're still gonna have to have this plugging, filling with water or compressed air test,
Correct.
no matter what.
Correct. At least once every 20 years.
Well, what if the home's only 10 years old?
If it's 10 years old and it has a proper permit on record with the district, I'm gonna say that they would be.
That would be satisfactory.
Thank you, there's Randall. You can see there. Yeah, that you would be okay in that situation. You wouldn't need to get one.
Okay. And everybody passes that pressure test when it happens, that this had a new lateral replacement?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, that's the intent. If the work is done correctly, you should be passing the pressure test, yes. I don't think it's considered an overly excessive.
If there's two homes and their laterals come out and then they share that connection, maybe the last 100 feet goes down to the sewer.
Yeah.
Who's responsible? Do they join, are they, only one of these houses is for sale.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we gonna pressure test them both, even though they go into a common final lateral down, or?
The language on common laterals, and that's how we refer to those, and it's just as you described, two or in some cases two or more properties that are sharing a single physical lateral. And of course, one of the challenges with those in our service area, given it's the way it developed and the topography and so forth, is you have that situation. It's not terribly uncommon, and it often has no accompanying documented easements to go with the lateral, showing ownership or access, legal access rights and so forth. We do run into those. We run into them when there's emergency calls sometimes from property owners. The language in the ordinance says in so many words, the related property owners that use that lateral are collectively responsible for meeting the obligations. So it basically says you need to figure it out between you as the responsible parties who own and operate that private lateral.
Okay, and then finally, I thought we were talking about 60 days to comply. And this says 30 days. I got the old ordinance out and I've been trying to find the 30 days. I can't even find the 30 days. I'm not sure where the 30 days.
It won't be in the original ordinance 66, because it was language we added in one of those subsequent updates. It may be, I thought it was,
68.
60 days.
I'm sorry, but it's
We
how
revised
many
it to
days?
I believe it was revised to 60 days.
okay, I may have misspoken, Frank.
Okay, we
earlier.
couldn't say that. It
Yeah.
is 60 days.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't have, it.
Because
okay, thank
I
you.
remember we
Yeah.
changed that.
Yeah, thanks. I know we went back and forth.
That was based on.
And I'm ready to talk about 6 months.
No, yeah, thank you. I
60
misspoke.
days.
60 days.
From the day of escrow.
Correct, from the close.
Close.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
If I can just take a few seconds.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that the realtors and our staff has been able to come together and do this in this last week. Has shown us the importance of this. There's 200 miles of our pipes and 200 miles of laterals. On any given day, we send 11 million gallons to the Central Marin Sanitary Agency. And last Wednesday or Thursday during the big rain, we sent 103 million gallons to CMSA.
We were 53.
Well,
CMSA handled
Right,
103.
but as a whole, I mean, it's not just up Ross Valley, it's our whole district here. And we were at 53 million gallons, normally we send 6 a day, 5 or 6. So it's so important that this is just a start, and I'm sure there's gonna be modifications to it, but the fact that we can all come together and agree for the safety of our community, because when we spew, it's not a good thing, and it's not safe for the environment. So this is a terrific thing that you all have done, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
So one quick question, let's say 60 days is not enough, it's a very complicated sale. Is there a way they can appeal or not?
You mean for additional time?
Right. Will they just come to the board?
I don't think there is specific language allowing for appeals of that nature. I think in general that property owners or customers can always come to the board, I guess, under extraordinary circumstances
And there are extenuating, if staff would chime in.
Sure, please.
There are extenuating circumstances that do occur. With regards to the permit process itself, there is a time allowance built into existing ordinance and existing sanitary code that allow for up to 1 year for completion.
Okay.
However, if an applicant does also pull into the lateral grant program, there is a timeline associated with that money. Likewise, the person can always lobby for a time extension and explain their extenuating circumstances.
Okay, let's go to the public. Any person in the public wish to comment on this issue? Yes, sir.
I'll go.
Your name?
I'm Blaine Morris, I'm the president of the Marin Association of Realtors. Thank you for putting us on the agenda tonight to talk about this. I would like to thank all of you, and to Mr. Borstein's comments that we've come together. We have had the opportunity to comment on this, but this is our first opportunity to come before you and be on the agenda and talk about this together. And we're supposed to implement this in 2 weeks. So we're delighted that we're finally able to come here and have this conversation with you. First thing I want to say is the Marin Association of Realtors supports fixing this problem in our community. We have a problem. I've heard from my members, 1,400 members. We want to be part of the solution. What Ross Valley has done, though, with this pressure test, hasn't created a point of sale inspection. They have essentially implemented a mandatory replacement program if your house, your lateral is more than 20 years old. A story was told to me yesterday by a pretty senior realtor in our community who was out looking at a lateral at with one of your biggest partners in this. I encouraged her to try and comply with the ordinance going forward because she's going to be coming on the market after the first year. The inspection was done. The plumber out there told this homeowner, who was just looked at her line, that looked pretty good. The line looks good. and it would be fine, and I wouldn't recommend doing anything. And he went on to tell her that if she was in Mill Valley or Sausalito or Belvedere, this would probably be the end of it. But she was informed that she had to complete this pressure test, which the plumber told her she would most likely fail. The realtor asked the plumber how many of these pressure tests he'd done, kind of in the ramp up of this program. He said he'd done 12. And how many of those pressure tests have been passed? There were none. So I've heard it over and over again as I've sold houses in the last 6 months. We've been talking about this and having sewer lateral inspections. None of them are going to pass that are more than 20 years old. That's who has to get inspected. So basically, it's not a point of sale inspection that we have right now. It's a kind of a long-winded way, expensive way of implementing a mandatory replacement program. If you're selling a house in Ross Valley going forward, if this ordinance is not amended, you're going to have to replace your sewer lateral. I mean, there might be occasional occurrences where you've got a perfect lateral, but basically the pressure test is what is commonly used to make sure that a brand new lateral is sound. What you're requiring is for all the laterals in the district to meet that same standard. And none of them will. They've all said that a lateral that's a year old will most likely fail. I sold a house in Starrfeld Country Club a couple of weeks ago, and it had the lateral replaced. And it was on hillside property, way down at the bottom, there's a little root intrusion. And the plumber said, don't worry about it. I mean, it's kind of watch and wait thing. But I asked him if pressure test world, would that pass? He goes, absolutely not, it wouldn't pass. This is someone that had replaced their lateral probably in the last 10 years. So we're very concerned about this, just of the onerous cost on homeowners. And basically, everybody's going to have to replace their sewer lateral to meet this pressure test requirement. And the district staff has admitted as much to me, and I think their numbers were 85 to 90% of them were going to fail. It's a mandatory replacement program. So if it's a mandatory replacement program, why, if there's money in the grant program, is that money not automatically available to somebody? If your lateral is bad enough to warrant replacement, I'd love to see it if there was, you would automatically qualify. If you got to replace your lateral and there's money in the grant program, you should be able to get that money. But even beyond that, I think it is a poor practice. It's very troubling. The real estate sales will go on. We will figure out how to deal with this. It's not going to affect our pocketbook or the ability to sell property. It's just kind of ridiculous that we've got, quite frankly, what are probably a lot of working laterals out there that are going to have to get replaced to meet this as-new requirement to sell your house. And I think the question of parity came up earlier. There's no other municipality in Marin County that's requiring a pressure test. In Sausalito, in Belvedere, in Sazum, where they've gone through this process, there's no pressure test requirement. It is put the camera down there, look out, see, and let you guys arguably decide if that lateral needs replacing or not. The threshold in Ross Valley is entirely, it's going to be difficult for us as brokers to educate our realtors on which side of the street we're on or which town we're in, what sort of threshold we need to be able to, we need to be looking for. But quite frankly, and this large plumber has told as much to one of these senior realtors yesterday, pretty much everyone's going to have to replace their lateral to sell their house. If you replaced your lateral 25 years ago and it's working fine, you're going to have to replace it to sell your house. And I don't know that that was the intention of this body when it passed this ordinance, but it is the end result of what's going to happen. I just want to talk on a couple more things if you'll indulge me for a moment.
Okay, you're kind of, give us.
Okay, I mean,
finish it up. Yeah.
well, the issue of shared laterals, I think one of you asked about that. As I read the FAQ that was given to us a week ago, if you've got a shared lateral, to sell your house, you've got to hook it up directly to the lateral, to the main of the street. There's no in-between stage. It is if you've got a shared lateral to sell your house, you've got to run a new line out to the street to sell your house. It may go across somebody else's property. It may have been built in 1885 and there's no easement. And your neighbor might not want to tear up his pool to put in a new lateral. there's, I mean, and that's a fringe occurrence, I suppose, but it is going to come up. I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't know if any of the rest of my colleagues have anything to say, or if you have any questions for me on what I just said.
Thank you, comment. Anybody else like to speak?
I'd like,
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Andy Fegley, CEO of the Marin Association of Realtors. Thank you again for having us here tonight, and have appreciated working with staff from a staff to staff perspective to get the rollout ready for this. We've had some challenges with timing with the holidays around us, but one of the biggest concerns that I think we all share is the education process. Again, the intricacies of this, and we've been working with your staff to develop some frequently asked questions, a document, FAQ document that we can provide to our members. And through our education process, that list of questions has grown considerably. I think we started off, the first document that Wendy shared with me that we've been working on had about maybe 8 or 9 frequently asked questions on there. From doing quick polls with our members and talking to them, it's grown to about 20 questions that are all relative to the ordinance itself and the unintended consequences that will arise from the ordinance. So working with staff, again, we've got this rolling out in 2 weeks. I know we're talking about a middle of January kind of a let's all come together and talk about this open house educational program, which we are 100% in support of. I would like to get we need some clarity, and I think again we asked the questions that we said we were going to ask, and now the clarity is going to be the biggest part for us. So perhaps you can take a look at those FAQs. Staff I think is working to address those. But with 2 weeks out from implementation, we've got to work together to put together this document, because it's coming. And our folks, again, did not think that 8 questions was enough. So hopefully we can work together in continued fashion. So.
Thank you, that's our plan, for sure, and we continue to want comments. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak on this issue? Okay, well, I'll bring it back to the board.
Speak now or forever.
Aaron Burrell, owner broker of Holmesboro Real Estate and actually treasurer of the Marin Association of Realtors as well. I think that our biggest concern as realtors is looking at this as there's placing an impediment also on the sale, because there's so many questions as how this will be implemented on each individual property. The state has a law about when you replace heating ducts. Very interesting. You don't test the heating ducts and replace the heating ducts, then test them again. You test them after you've replaced your heater. It seems awful repetitive to be doing a pressure test on things that we already know are going to fail. The cost on the homeowners is going to be a significant burden, as well as the replacement of these laterals run, as everybody knows, from in this room, from $6,000 to $30,000-$40,000. It's not a fence that fell down. I mean, this is an expensive fix for these homeowners.
Tonight's ordinance that we're really going to talk about is to actually fix that language. My understanding, and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, is there is not a mandatory twice. So just what you said is exactly right. The pressure test, the only mandatory pressure test is at the end.
And even with that, though, it still is going to prove, as Blaine has pointed out, it's going to place a significant burden on the homeowners in the Ross Valley. I'm actually a homeowner in Fairfax as well, so this affects me personally as well as a realtor. It's a significant cost you need that they're going to absorb. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Right. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board.
I appreciate the feedback, and I hear you about education. I think it's going to be very critical to get this, once we jump started. And there's some sanitary districts, the East Bay Mud, they have like frequently asked questions, exactly for their lateral needs. And perhaps we need to do that, staff, to put it on our website, so we can link up with the realtors, so when their customers, clients have all these questions, they can just look at our website. I think that would be a great service, because there'll be anxiety around this, obviously, and not knowing. So that's one thing I have to say about it.
Thank you. You know, we're kind of in a unique position in Marin County. We happen to have a cease and desist order to fix our sewers, and we've got a capital improvement program of about 13 million a year. And about half of the I&I comes in from laterals. And so we're charging people to do quite a program to fix the main trunks and main sewer lines and the force mains. And the other half of the issue is these laterals. And we're trying very hard to work with you and meet, you know, your needs. We do have the grant program, which provides half up to $4,000 from our side. As far as joint laterals go, I live on a driveway that's shared by 7 properties. And every 20 years or so, you kick in the big bucks to repave the driveway. And so that's what you have to do on shared projects. You know, I mean, if you're sharing a lateral, actually a shared lateral is a good deal because you don't have to pay all the costs yourself. I mean, you know, but yeah, you have the problem now with shared laterals when you know, when you sell a property. So we're continuing to work the kinks out of this. We're you know, we're still working with you, I hope. I think we are, and every time we've met as a board, we've encouraged our staff to keep working on these things. We've modified this ordinance several times, and Director Miggs mentioned East Bay Mud. That's another agency with a huge I&I problem, and they have had to implement sewer lateral programs along with us. So we're not trying to make it onerous, but you know, if a lateral's leaking, it doesn't get better. It gets worse and worse. And so that's probably the situation. You know, 20-year life, we replace, you know, sewers have a life anywhere from, what, 20 to 80 years. And so, you know, it's right in there. Anyway, that's my comments. Any other comments from the board?
Yes, I thought the interpretation was that there would be one pressure test.
There is.
And, well, no, not really. If it's a sale, it's gonna be 2 pressure tests. That's what we were just told.
No.
Okay, so, okay, here, let me give you the example, please. I'm gonna sell a piece of property, we've been there for 25 years, say. Needs a inspection, I read the CCTV down, and it looks fine. But before it sells, it has to have a pressure test. Because it's more than 20 years old. I have the pressure test, and lo and behold, it fails. Lost Valley says, folks, you need to replace the lateral. I replaced the lateral. Does it need one more pressure test?
That situation would,
So we're talking 2 pressure tests.
well, it could play out different ways. The inspection that said it should pass was obviously, well, I would assume it's indicating it's in pretty good shape. They may not end up replacing it, they might end up doing spot repairs. But ultimately, to complete it, you have to demonstrate one successful pressure test. So yes, I mean, it could certainly play out the way you described it, right? In that set of circumstances.
Any other comments?
If we have the one test, right?
See, you shouldn't get a pressure test if you do your CCTV.
Right.
And you see, you're gonna see a little bit of flaws or something, don't do a pressure test. Get it repaired.
Just get it repaired.
And then do a pressure test.
Okay.
How much does a pressure test cost? $1,500?
$1,000.
That's, I don't understand, about $1,000.
$1,000.
So, I'm just trying to avoid 2 pressure tests if possible. We used to do didn't we do a smoke test at one time? Are those not very,
We haven't done extensive smoke testing here. We've talked about bringing it back as a, more of a, like a neighborhood-wide I&I type approach, but not an individual. Yeah, there's gonna be individual circumstances that, you know, there's so many variables that come into play on these. The majority of situations that I think we're trying to address are this situation where it's pretty clear you've got an old house with an old lateral and no one's done anything to it for, 30, 50, how many years. We don't want there to be any confusion. The smart thing to do is first go get it inspected, verify that the condition is clearly indicating you might need to replace it, and then work with your contractor to figure out your options, take those steps that are most likely to get you to a successful pressure test. But the successful pressure test it's not an end to itself. It's the final, industry standard quality control that says your sewer lateral is in good condition. That's really all it's about. That's the purpose of it. And it's the gold standard because it says water's not seeping in, water's not seeping out. You can have structural integrity and no roots and all the water in the world coming in or out of that pipe. So there's a purpose to the pressure test is what I'm stressing. It's not just something we like people to do.
Okay, so I need to really understand this test. So it means testing by plugging and filling with water or compressed air. So an approved test fitting or plug shall be installed at or near the point of connection to the main sewer. So that means down close to the main sewer. How am I going to get a plug down there?
Contractor?
Contractor uses
Usually there's a main.
Ideally, you have a clean out near your property line
Okay.
or you're taking a step to access it.
Except when you don't.
There's several different methods that a contractor can use. Several different methods a contractor can use as part of the methods and means. Options include flowing it through a manhole up to the location, insert the inflatable plug into the lateral from the main line is one option. And there's other ways they can handle it too.
So will I plug each one of my toilets in the home house?
No, you're just testing your lateral. So from outside of your house to the connection of the sewer main is what you're trying to you're not testing your
Emergency
internal.
drain.
Am I doing it from my clean out to the street to the main sewer line?
Roughly from where your sewer exits your house to where it connects to the main line in the
So
street.
I have multiple exits, so.
You should only have.
I have to plug them all up.
Yeah, you should only have one. It should be after you've left your house, and it's the stretch that's from past your.
I know I have at least 2, so,
I have 2.
from different directions, they're coming from different directions.
Well, they
It
may be.
meets someplace.
Yeah, well, there you go. That would be a good indication of the problem we're trying to solve. I mean, where are those coming from? Are they coming from roof drains? Are they coming from your neighbors? Are they coming from unpermitted in-law unit? If you have connections coming into your sewer that you don't know where they're coming from.
No, I know exactly the
Okay.
toilet, 'cause I like,
Well, I think you'd only have one. You'd have it down at the bottom of
Yeah.
the trunk sewer, you plug that, and you put air and pressure in, and it goes to the lowest spot of your home, which is generally one of those overflow items. You should have one of those by law that, helps your house from not
I
flooding.
have it. It's
Okay,
between,
you have one plug then, that's all you have, down at the trunk sewer. Am I wrong on that?
oh,
Yeah, you want, even if you have 2 going in, you've got a Y, and then you go down to the
Okay.
trunk, you plug the trunk, and do your pressure test up. And it'll come out at a low spot in your property. I had a pressure test done in my
I might
house.
just have a pressure test just for the heck of it.
Well, and,
I'm really concerned about that, if they're all gonna fail.
but that's one of,
That's why we want them
Yeah.
replaced, they're failing. That's why we're redoing. all
Mine's
that.
cast iron, it should be pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, and, Vivian's sitting here in the room, and I think it's important to remember how we got to this point. But we were given a presentation that said,
the inflow and infiltration into your laterals, as evidenced by the way the flow goes from 6 to 53 million gallons when it's raining, is coming, a lot from the laterals. We're handling the parts that we have the responsibility for, and then we need to provide an incentive to property owners. We need to hit every one of the points we can to provide incentives to replace laterals. I mean, and I assume, I don't know anything about pressure testing at all, I've learned a lot tonight, but I assume that we do that because we want to, that's the standard, that's the industry standard. We should be able to pressure test a lateral. Yes, we may have to replace every 20-year-old lateral in Marin County and in the Ross Valley Sanitary District.
And I'd like to add the pressure test is a requirement of the CEO.
Louder, please.
The pressure test is a requirement of the cease and desist order.
Is it?
That's how it initially
That's very
was added to the
information.
ordinance.
It's a requirement, what's that?
Cease and desist.
The legal order that we're under from the state.
So we have no choice, we have no choice.
Let's proceed with the word order.
I do want to add that on these lateral ordinances,
There is a
some
requirement
of
to
them are a
test.
lot more stricter than what we're doing. That I believe in East Bay, if your house is a certain age, they can, after so many years, you have to, I'm pretty sure I read that in their ordinance, if the house is a certain age.
Yeah, I
It
read
has to
the
be
ordinance,
inspected.
I know it's, in terms of the frequency, it's similar, it's either 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
I want to.
So it's not just about point of sale, I mean, this is all gonna happen nationally.
Okay, our point of business tonight is to correct the language about two requiring an initial pressure test levels. All it is tonight, we're going to continue, evidently, I can tell, this discussion with the realtors, the Builders Exchange, great, and others. Please, we've asked our staff to be sure to continue. We're going to work on it, okay? We're continuing. We want to implement it, though. It's a requirement of our cease and desist. And it's the other half of the shoe, or whatever you call it. We've got to repair all our sewers. A couple of $100 million maybe.
One more thing, there's a little conversation going on, and I agree, the cease and desist order says that we shall consider an ordinance, a point of sale ordinance. It did not say that we had to adopt one. Where does it say that we have to do pressure testing?
There are requirements for the ordinance that the board must consider, and one is to test upon point of
Okay,
sale.
so we were required to consider, and then the subset of that was it shall, so I think both points are right, and you're right, we were not required to pass this lateral replacement ordinance, but we did, and so once we passed it, it needs these certain elements.
Okay,
Can I
back
make
to
a
this.
motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we ready
You
for
should.
No, I've got just a couple more things, so I need to come.
But remember, the issue before the board is just to correct the language.
I
We don't have to
understand.
solve the ordinance tonight.
No, I'm listening. Okay, we just had a flow-based study, and one of the results was that Larkspur Boardwalk and Larkspur Marina at high tide are sucking in bay water. We're pumping it over to Central Mass Sanitation Agency, and we're paying to treat bay water over there. We went up to 53 million gallons during that peak of this last rainstorm. A good portion of that was bay water that we're sucking up and sending it over to Central Marin. I don't believe that all of that came from sewer laterals. When I say the idea that it's coming down through your yard and getting into your lateral and creating 53 million gallons peak during the day, I don't think that's correct. I would like to know how much bay water we sucked in that same period and sent over to CMSA. They've got the chloride content, and they talk about some of the peaks. Our chloride content goes way up too.
I mean, it's all interesting, I agree at this point, but.
So how can we say that this is going to be one pressure test? Is there any way we can say the intent is to have one pressure test?
Well, there may be circumstances where you unavoidably, it'd be unfortunate, but you may end up based on the way the events play out, because the end goal is to do one successful pressure test, to demonstrate the material competency and the hydraulic tightness of your lateral. That's the purpose. How you get there is largely up to you within the limits of the standard, but it gets tricky. I don't see a way, Frank, I guess to your question, to ensure through code language that that's all you ever do. It would be, I think we just can't predict how these will play out. And as the examples that have been given tonight show, there's so many site-specific and condition-specific variables that we can't predict. I do think that we're making every effort to make it practical, that you don't do unnecessary work. We're certainly looking for those types of opportunities. And I will also say, because to the point of the financial impact, which is to the owners of the properties, which is very notable, and very important, we're all really paying a lot of money for this as it is. We pay one way or another. Okay, this district is helping support, roughly $70 million in debt that was used to expand the wet weather treatment of the CMSA plant. We're all paying that debt service. All of our customers are paying that debt service. When we build a plant, when we build a pump station that has to handle 10 or 15 times its peak flow, we're not moving wastewater, we're moving stormwater because of the condition of the system and laterals. That is our operations and maintenance costs. It's our capital facility costs in perpetuity. So my point is, it's important to keep in mind this is one element of a really broad program that's investing resources in a whole range of places to help solve the problem. We're really trying hard to avoid putting a burden, unnecessarily on any one player in this whole scheme. But as you guys have discussed it, and I think this board has spent a lot of time talking about, this is an undeniable long-term challenge for the community, and this is one element of a comprehensive program to start addressing it. It's not putting the burden on any one party here. It's intended to help attack this from a whole bunch of different, directions. Anyway, that's.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I motion at this point then, just this specific amendment, that we adopt ordinance 69, which clears up the language and amends ordinance number 66 with regards to the awarding of the pressure testing. And then we go ahead and adopt ordinance number 69.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
You worked on the,
Okay.
did you work on
Any further discussion on the board?
Well, can I just add a friendly amendment that we review this in 1 year to get do a critique from what's happening out there, just to get like an updated report, just to see how.
I think they should review it all the time.
It's
Well,
going
but I'm
to be
just-
very
Yeah,
often.
you'll be hearing, you'll certainly be
All right.
hearing them.
All right,
Continue.
never mind.
Continue.
So daily updates.
And I would hope that if the Marin Association of Realtors
They will.
works with staff, and we're all in, we want to make this work badly.
All right, we need a roll call?
It's ordinance. Do I need a roll call vote for that? Okay.
Orstein,
Yes.
Silla,
Yes.
Meigs,
Aye.
Egger,
Aye.
Gaffney.
All right. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go to agenda item number 17. It's at 8 o'clock. Okay. Let's be back here at 8:10, okay? Okay, is everybody here? There is. Okay, item 17, discussion and direction regarding district property located at 2000 Marshall Lane, Marshall. Agenda item 17. Mr. Manager?
Sorry, I'll do a quick introduction into the role. So this topic is pretty fresh. It was discussed at the last board meeting, or 2 board meetings ago, I should say. We've been working on the direction provided at that last meeting. So what has occurred is, based on the last board discussion, direction was provided to staff to go work with the potential parking partners and begin essentially filling out the details of this concept of the 5-year interim use parking. And also to coordinate or communicate with the city of Larkspur and start to understand more completely what the land use and permitting and CEQA issues and process might be expected to be required for this. The staff participated in at least 6 formal meetings and several, a number of smaller meetings through phone calls and so forth with all those parties. Very, very productive discussions with decision makers, in the sense from those entities, meaning the head of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District participated in 3 of these meetings at least. Senior staff from the city of Larkspur, representatives of the Marin Airport, representatives of the Country Mart retail complex. People really rolled up their sleeves and dug into this in no uncertain way. And also we had an opportunity to have follow-up conversations with the EPA staff, including a site walk, to confirm their understanding and resolve or attempt to resolve questions on the conditional permitting that's been, conditional approval that's been issued by EPA. So the takeaway of all of those discussions was really the following. Conceptually, the site could accommodate somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 cars. That was really seen as the maximum using all of the available space. That was more than exceeded by the demand of those 3 parties. But what also became clear was that once the Marin Airport vacated their old site at the other end of Larkspur Landing, that the Golden Gate Highway Transportation District's needs were going to drop significantly and really turn into just occasional need for like special events and so forth. But their week in and week out commuter demand would be largely met with the 350 spaces. In the middle of all of that, because of considerations totally, outside of the district's influence, meaning the lease agreements between Golden Gate and the Marin Airport, there were just basically business decisions made by those parties, and the end result was that Marin Airport is pursuing a direction right now that is relocating their operational base, the one that they have at Larkspur Landing, to a property owned by Golden Gate on Anderson Drive in San Rafael. And they're moving to that lease option at this point. Again, just out of business decisions. The main one being that the lease termination and time they had to make a decision simply didn't, in a lot of ways, work with what was becoming apparent about the length and complexity of the process. The discussions with the city of Larkspur, again, very, very productive, very informative, and basically concluded that there was one most apparent path that you would follow to achieve this, to achieve the land use approvals for the interim parking. And it was what's referred to as seeking a modification to the approved precise development plan. So the precise development plan is what is on the books today. And you'd be going back to the city and saying, okay, we'd like to submit for an amendment to that plan to allow the 5-year interim parking use. That was deemed the most probable and appropriate path for the city approvals, just to give you a sense of the process. That in turn would act as a springboard basically for the CEQA process, because to submit an application for the amendment to the precise plan, you have to begin developing information on details and impacts and so forth. It was unclear whether we'd be looking at anything from a mitigated negative declaration to a full EIR and CEQA, depending on really the findings of the impacts analysis and so forth, the information that would be developed. But it would not be, let's put it this way, it would not be a several month process from start to finish. It would be like in the 6 to 12 months was just a very rough guess, given the standard process. With EPA, what we learned was that there still seems to be a significant gap between our understanding and interpretation of their conditions and what their technical staff are repeating back to us. We've had a number of communications trying to narrow that gap. And the practical impact of that is when you have 9 pages of conditions and the parties involved are uncertain as to what some of these are going to require, it really puts a fly in the ointment of trying to figure out how you're going to do all this in terms of risk mitigation, predictability of schedules and timelines and so forth. So with all of that and, you know, kind of as part of the supporting information, the takeaway that staff has reached from this effort is that the interim parking, 5-year interim parking use certainly was and remains we think, a valid concept, and the public benefit objectives were valid, but the practical reality of implementing it as a sort of a stopgap while we figure out the longer-term course for the parcel no longer really made sense given what we've learned over the past 2 months, understanding the process more completely and some of the risks and issues involved. So that's the conclusion of the staff report you have in front of you. I know we have a couple different parties here for this topic, and we can answer any questions at this point.
Okay, so board member comments? We did have our first promotion committee.
Oh, thank you. I
Friday
apologize.
night we were
I
there.
completely neglected to mention that, sorry.
Friday night.
Obviously, we had the committee meeting, it was very, very well attended. The summary notes were provided in your board package. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, there's phase 1 and phase 2 of the EPA, right?
That's what we proposed, yes.
So is phase 1, the early part where the parking
The 5-year parking would be paid.
and that, we have enough information to move ahead on that?
No. We thought we might, and we got a very extensive letter from EPA,
Okay.
and some of it makes sense to us, but a fair amount of it is very unclear.
Okay, and phase 2 is still not.
That's what we want to decide if we
Yeah.
want to pursue.
And have you heard back from the city of Larkspur since that meeting? Any talk?
We haven't had any further
discussion?
communications, no.
Okay. That's all I have for right
And that comes to my point, which is in Frank's summary of the meeting, the Larkspur Landing Committee meeting, he says the US EPA has just authorized a temporary short-term use with conditions. So you're saying that is true, but the conditions are so onerous or it would really be
Yeah.
hard to get them all satisfied in the short term.
That is correct. So they did issue what they call a conditional approval letter. And it says this is approved, but comply with these conditions. And I'll give you a very good example of the magnitude of the disconnect in a sense, and I don't mean that, negatively towards the EPA, it's a complicated issue, trying to close the gap. We've been communicating very consistently, we thought, about this 2-phase approach, and that the conditions would only address what was needed for this interim parking. They've applied approval conditions that involve off-site sampling of neighboring private properties, fairly extensive air quality sampling, sort of wide open requirements for additional testing and site characterization. And I think most of concern to the technical team and to staff, really comments that are sort of saying, well, you sort of did this extensive amount of study, but we're not sure we fully accept it. So there's this really foundational set of technical documents and studies that we are basing our conclusions and recommendations on. And what we're hearing is, well, we weren't necessarily involved in all of that work, so we're really not sure. We'll get back to you, but we're not sure it's all going to suffice. So there's some really significant technical gaps that can be resolved. I mean, I don't want to imply that we can't get there with EPA, but they're not gonna happen in 1 or 2 meetings or in 2 or 3 months. We started this dialogue in earnest almost 12 months ago, just to get the conditional approval, which we received in November of this year. When we left, and this again, it's complicated, this isn't meant to criticize EPA, we left our last meeting in late 2013 thinking that by all the assurances and indications, we were looking at March, maybe April 2014 to have all this underway. So the reality has been much slower and much more complicated, which for veterans of working with EPA and CCD issues, they might tell us,
Well,
welcome to the real world.
besides that, though, there's the general plan and there's the amending.
Correct.
And does Larkspur really want to play with us? Because it's,
And the conditional use permit from the EPA is essentially do everything, isn't it? I mean, it's essentially the long-term cleanup.
Yeah, it has references to completing mitigation of soils before, it's a very, they've mixed and matched what we would consider the phase 1 and the phase 2 requirements and blended them all into phase 1. So again, it's not so much that we can't probably reach clarity or resolution on these things with EPA, but we've been trying very hard for 6 weeks now, just from that one letter, and it's clear it's gonna take us longer than that to start to get to some kind of closure with them.
And at this point, it's a moot point, because Marin Airporter had to make a strategic decision of, we can't count on doing this at our property. They had to take the option of going to Anderson, and once they cut that loose, then that freed up where the Marin Airporter is, to give them the Golden Gate Transit, the parking that they needed. So now, other than Marin Country Mart, nobody really needs that parking at this point.
Right, at a minimum, as this plays out over the next 6 months, you're gonna see the practical impact of that change, and people will have a much better idea how much remaining need there might be, meaning once you see the ferry customers now using those extra 350 spots, that takes some of the spillover pressure off of the retail complex and so on. It won't be crystal clear, but I think if we're looking at this picture 6 months from now, we'll have a lot better idea of what the remaining, need is for that benefit for the parking.
well, plus the Golden Gate Ferry is, I read in the paper, what I told you on the phone, they're gonna create these pickup places in various parts of Marin, so you won't have to park near the ferry. They will bus you to the ferry for free, like a park and ride in San Rafael.
That's just in the IJ a couple days ago, that they're doing that from Lucas Valley Road and taking you to the Golden Gate
But
Ferry
that-
right now.
But it takes some of the pressure off around the ferry and,
Of the parking.
yeah, the parking's really bad.
Do you have any comments, Frank?
I was just going back through some old minutes. In 2010, when I first came on the board, we were talking about it. In 2011, we went out to bid. I think the engineer's estimate was like $35,000 to pave it for Golden Gate Transit. Bid came in over $50,000, and boy, said, oh, that's too much money to spend. So we kind of dropped the idea at $52,000, I think it was. So here we are, 4 years later, we're still talking about it. In reading the report, my concern remains, as was, is, and remains, the toxics that are in the ground. There may be a way to put a seal on it, cap it. But I'm concerned about the long-term liability, possible health impacts of anyone who would move on to live on that site, and the long-term liability for the taxpayers of the Ross Valley should 20 or 30 years from now a cancer cluster come up in that area, and we get the blame. We've already put out $4.75 million as a settlement of the lawsuit because of the toxics that were in the soil. It cost us $1.6 million to defend that lawsuit. Plus, I guess, another couple $100,000 in staff time and consultant time to prepare plans. And all this time we've recently spent dealing with the EPA and the fines. I've got but the fines were 17,000 or 22,000, it wasn't a lot. But, so, I mean, all that adds up, and it was interesting, an estimate, a horseback estimate of $500,000 to clean the site from, I guess, one of our consultants that's currently looking at the issues for us, all the way to $5 million. Estimate 4 years ago. It's someplace in between that, who knows what it is, but, I don't know, let's see what the folks have to say. The committee had recommended kind of moving forward, gently moving forward. We do have a letter from the city of Larkspur, and they commented they had never really talked about a parking lot of the scale that we were talking about. And so little city of Larkspur had some issues with parking, and they were kind enough, the mayor and vice mayor both came to our committee meeting. They were here, they participated. City of Larkspur has been a good partner, working partner for us. How will they react to if we decide we're terminating the discussion about inter-parking? Should they be told first, or might they have some other ideas, or?
Well, I know at the senior staff level, city manager, department development director.
Did they get your report?
They're aware of the general status of this, yes. I mean, they were pretty heavily involved in the discussions, so they were aware of the change that occurred with the Rainier Porter decision. They did receive this report.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know, I do want to emphasize, in case there's any, they were extremely supportive and available for this process. Mm-hmm. We never lacked for, direction or input from the Larkspur staff. They were very forthcoming with recommendations and assistance on very short notice. I know that. The city manager came back from a vacation, and his Monday activities included an hour-long meeting on this topic after being gone for a week. So they truly made a strong effort to support this. So yeah, I don't know what their formal reaction, will or won't be, but I do think whatever that will be, it will be based on a good full of information, because we've been there's been very good information back and forth.
The committee did have a presentation from Community Venture Partners about a possible long-range solution. At least where Ross Valley would continue to own the land. They would lease the land and have a farm and have senior housing and workforce housing and space for Ross Valley Sanitary District headquarters. There wasn't a hotel on that plan. And they did make a presentation to the committee.
Would we have to clean it up first?
Well, no, in fact, they talked about they would go out and get grants to have the site cleaned up as part of the lease arrangement. Because if they were to have a farm there, they wouldn't want any residue of PCBs in the soil, so, and they felt they could an organic farm. They felt that they could get federal grants necessary to clean the site, to thoroughly clean the site. That would be one of the conditions of them even coming on and setting up an agreement with us.
Let's hear what the public has to say. Anybody out there in the public wishes to comment? Go ahead. Ladies first.
All right. I would like to submit. My name is Laura Ethel. I live in Larkspur, and I'm a ratepayer here. I'd like to submit for the record an email that I sent to the two committee members, Pam Nix and Frank Edgar, on this point. I stood up and objected to the hydroponic farm, organic farm plan, because I didn't think it was a good plan. And one of the main reasons is that it's really beyond the core competency of the staff and the board of a sanitary district to evaluate whether this is a good project. And, and it's not for, well, it's not for this kind of a location. Maybe for some more rural location where these investors want to put their money, that's another story. But it really is more complicated than you can imagine. And with the assistance of my husband, Robert Milner, who's also here, I came up with one of the big problems with this particular project. And that is, there is a strong conflict at this point at the USDA over permitting hydroponic farms to be certified as organic. And what this proposal included, and I quote them here, they want a fully functioning hydroponic/aeroponic organic farming operation. Well, right now, theoretically, right now, there are some hydroponic farms that are being certified as organic, but there is considerable pressure at the USDA, which is responsible for determining what organic means. There's a lot of pressure on them to make that impossible. The organic farmers don't want the hydroponic farmers to be certified as organic. The USDA has a group of advisors, a group of farmers. They are organic farmers that constitute the National Organic Advisory Board to the USDA. And they are the ones that make recommendations as to what these requirements are going to be. Now, the theory behind this is a little difficult for me. I think there's something that's a little bit, we can kind of see it, but I've given you a link if you want to know what the real issues are between the organic farmers and the hydroponic farmers. I have a link that talks about that discussion. I don't know if you want to get into it that far, but the hydroponic farmers have to put the nutrients into the water. Organic farmers, as you know, rely on the composition of the soil, and they're not allowed to put certain types of things in there. It's much more difficult to meet those requirements if you're putting it into the water, because you don't have the soil, and you wouldn't want it if that's what you're doing. So there are both the National Organic Advisory Board that advises the USDA and a growers, an organic farmers group, are putting a lot of pressure on the USDA to remove the ability of hydroponic farmers to be certified as organic. Now, I don't know how this is going to turn out. If you really knew the industry, maybe you'd have an opinion. But even people who know can't really predict the future. I just think this makes that proposal very difficult for anybody to evaluate. And you have to be able to evaluate, to some extent, whether this is a feasible operation that's going to be able to pay your rent. If they reach a contract with you that says they have to pay so much money, well, they've got to be profitable enough, or if we're talking about some nonprofits here, they've got to be able to make this work. And if they can't make it work, they're not going to be able to pay your rent.
What if they clean up the site and then they can't pay the rent? And then you throw them out?
Well, if they can't pay the rent, you definitely have remedies, but you're in a mess.
Do you have a paper for us?
I do. I have a copy of this. It has some links. To whom should I?
Just give it to Tom, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
I have a couple of additional copies of it. I didn't bring enough for everybody.
I got the email.
You got it.
Same email?
Yes, the two of you already have that, so maybe you can give one to Marin.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure. You're welcome.
Anybody else like to comment? Yes, sir.
Robert Upton from Campus Properties. We're firstly like to support the staff in their recommendation that you move ahead to get a complete, I don't think it will be a no further action letter, but a complete remedial action plan from EPA that will deal with this issue for once and for all. It is an extremely complicated process. We've been through it a number of times in other locations. And of course, it just gets more complicated, as Greg said, where you're saying, well, on the one hand, we're going to do this first, and then we're going to come back and do that later. That just confuses those folks even further. We would like to suggest, well, first of all, pick up on Mr. Egger's comment. I think the solution here is absolutely, as he said, it's a cap of part of the property, and then the part that can't be capped, you have to haul it off. And the trick is capping as much as you can, because it's the hauling off that's really expensive. It's a lot of money. It's got to go to a dump, who knows where, Utah or somewhere. So the trick in negotiating this with EPA is obviously to get those costs down and to increase the amount that they say you can cap. We feel the way to do that is optimally to take the approved plans, show those to EPA. They will then be able to see where the development is going to take place, and they will be able to say, yeah, that's fine, all of this over here, it's going to be 10 feet down or 20 feet down, you can cap it, and you've got to take out this little bit over here and that little bit over there. And we, as the part of the entity that was previously the option holder on the property, we're very familiar with the plans. We're very familiar with this process. We would like to suggest, offer, that we sit down with Greg and your consultant and just discuss this as an approach and see whether they agree that it could be a beneficial approach. Obviously no cost or no obligation on your part, but just to explore this as a concept to see whether this might be something that the board would want to pursue. So, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does the solution you're proposing, is it still consistent with what the EPA is requiring?
Well, I don't, they haven't given us any indication of what they would consider to be an acceptable long-term solution. The concept you guys are describing, generally, I think, makes sense. I mean, you say, with the idea being that certain areas are covered with a concrete pad that has a building on it, et cetera. So the regulations, as we've had our internal technical discussions today, there's very detailed situations where that, as I understand it, would constitute an acceptable long-term site condition. In other words, certain, you have buildings in certain locations, there's a limited amount of remaining contamination below those, and it's, with a certain amount of clean fill and so forth, it meets, those very specific federal regulations. But what I do want to stress is, the information, the ideas, the approved plans now are at this point, I don't know whether it's 5, 6, 8 years old. It's apparent from us that the EPA is sort of very new to this whole conversation with this site. They had maybe some perfunctory involvement in the past, but they really are finally looking at it. So I guess my point is, we're not sure what they would deem acceptable alternatives for the long-term clearance of the site. I use that term loosely. What we have talked about just in the last round of staff and technical level discussions with this idea of, do we just go directly to what I'll call sort of the long-term solution with EPA or clearance, is you do have two paths in that option, or that path, that direction. One is what's generally referred to as a risk-based closure plan, which I think is maybe somewhere along the theme that you guys are discussing, where you're taking a very set number of actions that are meant to specifically mitigate a certain amount of risk in certain areas of the site. And I'm oversimplifying, but that's the terminology that's used. The other alternative is another general direction called, I'm probably going to get the terminology slightly wrong, but it's something like self-directed remediation. And basically, you essentially determine, in coordination with EPA, the clear definition of the problem and sort of the, no further questions asked when you're done. What is it that you have to do as the owner to do a self-directed remediation? Do these things, meet these standards, and the site is considered, I'll use the term remediated. Those are two different options in front of the district that would be getting you to the same location, which is a point of approval by the EPA for the long-term land use. One might be more restricted or specific in the sense of here's the layout you're proposing, and the other is sort of like when you're done, it's sort of a blank slate, you put the buildings and so on wherever you want, you've remediated the site. I want to stress that I'm speaking very generally tonight. These are complicated issues, and what's abundantly clear is we have a long way to go in the discussions with EPA to really get the clarity on what the best path is to get to that final remediation. So that's a long answer to your question.
The EPA will get back to us
Oh, yeah,
on the long phase.
we're speaking on a weekly basis.
Okay, that's all I needed to know, thank you.
Robert still.
Okay.
Yes.
One other thing I meant to mention, also Mr. Rager brought up, long-term viability, obviously that's critical in these situations. The board is going to want to be absolutely sure that there is no long-term viability. The way I would suggest you approach that is, first of all, you've got to get the EPA to sign off in one of these ways, and then you buy an insurance policy. Once you've got the EPA sign off, it's very easy and cheap in the context of what we're talking about, relatively cheap to buy an insurance policy. So at that point, the board will presumably sell the property, but they would know that if whatever you had in the contract of sale, if that didn't work out as a first line of defense, your ultimate line of defense will be an insurance policy.
Let's make it clear, we're not sure if we're going to sell or lease.
No, I
or
understand,
whatever.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
clarify
Nothing
that.
this week.
Right,
Yeah,
not
baby
this week.
steps, I think, yeah.
You know, anything else? Public?
What-
Any other public comments?
Council.
No, I'm gonna.
Yeah, just before you move on, I wanted to mention something, but go ahead and have your discussion. It was just, it's like a follow-up item.
I can bring it back, but anybody else would like to comment? Okay, let's bring it back to the board, and Counselor?
Just when we move forward with some of this, I think we should still touch base with the city of Larkspur, the manager and the planning department to find the status of those ordinances and what would be needed to implement any of those, because there are precise plans and conceptual plans. They're based on an old EIR, and what would it take to actually go and try to implement those ordinances at this point? If that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe it's that clear cut, and you're also having some development out there that is based on an old EIR and old traffic studies and all of that. So I don't think we can just recycle these plans at this time. So if you're gonna go forward, you should probably get sort of clear direction from what the city of Larkspur would want with those plans.
We agree. You know, the issue before the board is, should we continue working on the short-term parking plan, or should we end it? And I think the LL Property Committee recommends that we continue to pursue a short-term interim parking use. And staff wants to end it. And
Well, if I may, the committee was unaware that Marin Airport was no longer interested in the market.
Yeah.
we
didn't know
That's
that.
a new,
And once Marin Airport is no longer interested, it frees up
there's no hurry.
350 spaces, then Golden Gate Transit is probably gonna be less interested in running it short-term also, so,
Yeah.
you know, if we'd have known that, maybe our recommendation. would
That
be
was
different.
literally
Yeah.
unfolding, late that day. So
After the meeting.
we didn't, yeah, I mean, you guys, the timing was just what it was, so.
Yeah, my concern is that all these, people that came to the meeting and the city of Larkspur, I'm concerned that they're going to move forward, continue to have meetings, continue to talk and plan and it's,
Not getting anywhere.
right, and I don't want to drag them into more work. I don't want to drag our staff and us and yeah, and being on the committee has been many, many hours of the standing committee's time, the staff, I mean, it's been a lot of work. So personally, I'm kind of at a point of letting go.
Well, I heard
If it's a
your-
moot point, I mean,
I heard your meeting was quite good. actually.
it was a great meeting.
Yeah,
But 26 people.
yeah,
Yeah.
I heard good things.
If I might make just a quick thought here. There's two items on the recommendation. One is that we should end further work on the interim parking use, and then continue work on further use into the future. And one of the things we're gonna be discussing tonight is strategic plan. And I would suggest that we just adopt phase one and say, staff, don't spend any more time on this right now. Continue talking, yeah, no more interim parking, it's not gonna happen. Second, continue just talking to the EPA as you are currently for updates, and then work as part of a strategic plan, because we've got so much on our plate right now. It's not hurting anybody for it to sit there. I don't think my personal opinion is, let's get all of the things having to do with sanitation at this point under control, strategic plan in place, and see where the sale of this property fits in to our strategic, long-term strategic plan.
Who said we were gonna sell the property?
I didn't say that.
I thought you just said it just now.
Strategic.
A strategic plan, where the whatever of this property, the demise,
No, you have a
what you want.
strategic plan,
What to
figure
do
out
with
what
it.
to do with it.
What, or how much
Or
energy,
how
how much
to do it.
energy we're gonna commit to it. Because this says, it doesn't give an idea of how much staff time is gonna be used, and I think our personal opinion is our staff time could be much better used with the rehabilitation of the pump stations at Bon Air Center and things like that, and get that part of our house under control, and then figure out in a logical fashion the strategic plan. So I would suggest that we don't do number one, that the other action is determined by the board with, let's not spend any more time
We do
with the
the
parking.
parking.
Well, no, but not the second part, towards the long term. I don't know what we want to do over there. Yes. And work with the EPA towards a long-term permanent site clearance, that we not do that, not pursue that second part of that sentence right now, and make that a part of our strategic plan.
Oh, I see. Why don't you make a motion?
I don't wanna do that. I mean, we don't even have, the strategic plan is gonna be, what, 6 months from now?
Well, if I
I
can
mean,
make a, sorry, just
Yeah,
a
go
quick
ahead.
comment. Yeah, so Michael, if this helps in the considerations, the working with EPA towards the long-term permanent site clearance, that may sound more committing or what have you than it is. What we would be doing under that direction is really just continuing dialogue with EPA to get clear definition of what needs to be done. And so the reason I stress that is regardless of almost any foreseeable decision that comes out of the subsequent strategic planning process, and is what it says the district would like to do with the site in the future, having made that progress with EPA is going to be universally beneficial
We're
to
gonna
any
have
of
to do
those.
it, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And the reason I feel that's important as well is that it took us a fair amount of pushing to get EPA involved, really engaged at the table. Staff are active, they're working on this. My concern would be if we sort of said, hey, thanks, we'll come talk to you in 6 or 12 months, that we'd have to rebuild that momentum with them. And our technical team's not really here this evening, they can speak better to this, but I think we've been involved enough over the past 12 months to see how difficult that is. We're not precluding anything, and it should support or be constructive progress towards anything that the district decides to do going forward. And last thing is, we haven't really talked a lot about the technical team. It's really 2 people. You don't see them, we can always, I offered to have them come to the board meetings, but it's Todd Miller of Kennedy Jenks, I want these names to not be unfamiliar to people, and Alvin Greenberg of Risk Sciences Incorporated. They've been our core technical
Can
specialists.
I have their names just so I can?
Yeah, certainly. So Todd Miller is with
Uh-huh.
Kennedy Jenks, and Alvin Greenberg is Risk Sciences. Their work can continue. We are not spending a ton of money on this. These are relatively modest expenditures to just keep these meetings going and push for direction from EPA. So just for clarification of what that means, we would be doing.
Okay, thanks. How about a motion from the board? I think we're.
So I motion that we direct staff and further work to pursue the interim parking use and work with the EPA towards a long-term permanent site clearance and issuance of an FMA letter.
Can you notify Larkspur?
Yeah, we'll be in touch with
Thank you.
I'll second.
Any further report?
just a comment for the record. We were talking about cover and cap of the site. I don't support cover and cap of the site. I support total removal of all toxics because of the potential health impacts and adverse health impacts
And long-term
long-term
liabilities.
taxpayer liability
Yeah.
of
I
the
kind
toxic
of agree
side.
with you. Any more discussion? Yeah, we're gonna do, I guess we're gonna get started with what the EPA wants us to do, and then, they're probably not gonna cut us any breaks. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're on to item number 13. 13, accept the financial plans. Okay, Mr. General.
I'm going to hand it over very quickly. So we have Derek Rampone is with us this evening. This is the second fiscal year annual independent financial audit that we've done with Moss, Levy, and Hartzman. We engaged, I think it's a 3-year contract. I
Yeah,
believe. So this is the second of that 3-year cycle. So there's been some good continuity and consistency in the approach and in the team. You have the audit in front of you. We did also, and Derek was participated in this. We did a review of the audit with the finance committee as well. I won't attempt to go through the summary. I'm going to hand it over to Derek to do that.
All right,
Thank you, Derek.
thank you. Good evening, board. My name is Derek Rampone with Moss, Levy, and Hartzman. I was the lead audit manager on your engagement again this year. We've issued 2 reports. One is the audited financial statement, and I'm going to go through that. I'll hit the highlights real quick for you. Probably one of the most important things is on page 2 of the report, and that's our audit opinion. It's the top of page 2. We gave an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion possible, meaning that it's a clean audit. The numbers that are presented in the audited financial statements are fairly presented. No large modifications need to be made. We're comfortable with the numbers in here. We've audited and verified all the balance sheet items. If you continue on, there's the management's discussion and analysis, which is an overview written by management and reviewed by us. It's a good executive summary on what's changed from year to year. It gives kind of an analytical and reasons why things have gone up or down. That starts on page 4 of the report. Following that runs pages 4 to 10, and then you've got your balance sheet, which shows all your assets and liabilities and your resulting net position of the district. Your net position did increase by $3 million this year. A lot of that, well, some of that is from the proceeds from the issuance of debt. You'll see on the following page 12 is your income statement, which shows all your revenues and expenses. You'll see towards the bottom of page 12, the $3 million I was referring to in the change in net position, which is slightly down from the year before, but not by much. Page 13 is the cash flow statement showing all the ins and outs of all the cash. So, whenever you issue debt, you get proceeds and pay off debt. So your cash goes up and down, and that's on page 13. It can be somewhat of a confusing statement, but it does show what happens to your cash from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. On page 16 is the note disclosure. This is basically the details, has the significant accounting policies of the district. It has the details of where your cash and investments are located and what the maturities are and what the ratings are on those investments. It gives information about what kind of capital assets the district holds. Obviously, most of them are in the ground, but it does gives you quite the details and what the district holds at the year end. It also shows all your long-term debts. So that's on the beginning of, or on page 26. The bottom of 26 will show how your compensated leave, post-employment benefits, and revenue bonds, and the other two debts that were paid off this year, the installment sale and the real estate loan that we had refinanced through the bond. You'll see the change, and then it also gives details subsequent to page 26 on what the interest rates are, what the terms are, what the future debt service payments are going to be on all the long-term debt. So it's a good section to read when you want to refer to what the actual details of the long-term debt, what the district owes to others. We also disclose in here your pension information. This will be changing next year. We discussed this in the Finance Committee meeting. GASB number 68 is going to impact this quite a bit. The information that you will be putting in here is from PERS, CalPERS. Hopefully will be easy to read. But it will just be disclosing more of the district's liability, the unfunded liability, so that'll be more easier to read and disclose, because as of now, it just talks about your current expenses, your current contributions, so.
Is that 29 you're on?
Yes, that's on 29, bottom of 28 and 29.
Next year, in our budget, we're gonna have to show the liability, right? Different than this year.
Correct, it's gonna change, well, and I don't know about the budget per se, but the financial statement, the audit, you'll be showing the liability, correct?
A dollar amount?
Yes.
Not a percentage, or
Correct.
just a flat out dollar?
It'll show your
Switch it up.
unfunded, yep, correct.
Will that be for post-employment benefits and pension, or just?
Well, you already showed the post-employment, so this will be the pension part now. Yep, that's the new one, next year. And if you look on, starting page 33, it is your other post-employment benefits, so that's your health care, related to retirees. Nothing to do with pensions, totally separate. Okay, and then there's quite a bit,
We're
it's 2
not as
pages.
bad a shape as a lot of agencies.
Correct. You are not as bad a shape as some.
I know. I sit on another agency board with post-employment benefits liability is over $7 million right now. And we only,
Our pension may be.
this is not pension, this is
I
the
know,
benefit.
our pension may be in that range.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, there's preliminary reports that show.
So that, we went all over this.
For the pension side, because post-employment, you're much better than
We're in good
others,
shape.
but
It's obscure.
pension is,
So do we know what the actual unfunded post?
We're gonna.
for post-employment is 449,000. It's on page 34. The middle of
Oh, okay.
the funded
okay.
status and funded progress.
Right, okay,
The actuarial accrued liability for
Okay.
benefits, 449. So,
okay.
yes, this is much better shape than I have a feeling your pension numbers will be. Okay?
Oh, before we get too
Yes.
far away, back on page 23, note D, note receivable related party, and that was the loan to the former general manager. There's no mention of insurance here, and we did didn't we?
We filed,
File-
we did file a claim, Frank, and it has not reached final resolution with the carrier. I know there's been periodic progress on it back and forth. I don't think there's been anything in the last maybe 2 months, but it is in progress. Everything's been submitted. I know Christian's been handling that.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not mentioned here.
it's not mentioned
I
here.
mean, we could mention it, I guess, in the future. Once it's settled, I would assume we're gonna mention what was received.
Or if we get we're only insured for, I think, for 150,000. If we get 150,000 from the insurance company,
That's gone.
Right.
then that'll show up next year and the.
Correct, whenever you receive it.
It's always disclosed in our audit response,
In the audit letter,
Yeah,
correct, in the
our audit
confirmation
letter,
response,
yeah.
yep.
and it says we're working on it or something.
Yeah.
do we ever get rid of this? I mean, you know, say we got 150,000, do we, we're gonna have a receivable forever? I mean, he's never gonna pay it off.
Well, if he's convicted, we'll put in for victim restitution, and we'll keep, I'm sure the district will keep pursuing that, but theoretically, we could get it back.
It may not be worth it to keep pursuing it, you know, once we get our,
Well, we don't pursue it after, if, let's say he gets convicted, it will be part of the restitution, it will be part of his probation, it will be, we won't be pursuing it, it would be the DA's office.
We will have to, I think, renew it every so many years, the claim. I think it's every 10 years.
It'll be, yeah, so,
we digress.
We'll talk about the other.
On page 39 is a breakdown of between operating, maintenance, and general and admin expenses. It's more details on what makes up each department, I would call it, for my sake, and with all the costs, the types of expenses.
We noted there were no fines and penalties this year.
On the following page 40 is actually a new schedule this year. It's the revenues, both types, operating and non-operating, versus the budget versus actual. So you can see where the district is coming in regards to the budget.
This is really good.
You can see, obviously, on the middle of page 40, your property tax collections are much higher than in the budget as well. And overall, obviously, same thing with connection fees. So the difference between the budget and the actual is actually $1 million in the positive for revenues. Next page is 41. This is quite the opposite as far as revenues. It's expenses, operating expenses, and there's also positive results on this page as well, to the tune of $138,000 at the bottom far right. That's for your general and admin, and then your operating maintenance was another $330,000 positive. So definitely positive results in relation to the budget. Any questions on the audited financial statement?
We had a question about studies.
Oh, we did clarify that, yeah. Those were costs for the large damage condition assessment and the INV. So there were several studies done under capital.
That are capital related, but are expensed and not capitalized as part of a capital asset.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so they're expensed.
Okay.
So I have a question on page 10.
Page 10.
That,
Okay.
talking to Greg about this, and I'm not sure this is the time to do this, but, so reviewing the recommendations and deficiencies.
I think you're way ahead.
Never mind.
We're not there just yet.
You back on 10 or?
It was 10 on
Of the next report.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's anything else on the audited financial statements, we can go through that now, otherwise I will go to the next
So
report.
just a quick comment, it was a good move bringing our connection fees into 21st century.
It's a very good move.
And are they
The timing
automatically
was
indexed?
excellent.
yeah, they have
Yeah.
construction
And
and
so,
then,
are they indexed this month? Good. Okay.
they'll be, I think they go, no, they're July, aren't they?
It becomes effective July to July, and we refer to the, I believe, March to March ENR CCI.
So it's July, it's not.
Yeah, they go, yeah, with the new
Okay.
fiscal year,
Yeah,
but the new, for the 215 construction cost index or the,
Yeah, you use the March to March.
We
yeah,
use the
March.
March.
Okay.
Okay, good comment. So now we're on to attachment B.
Yes, that would be the management report and auditor's communication letter. This is a separate report issued giving our recommendations, observations, and recommendations. The first letter is the required communication to the board that states different aspects of our audit, if we encountered any difficulties, if we had any journal entries, if we had any disagreements, kind of a synopsis of the audit relationship throughout the year. The next page is page 4. This is your government auditing standards letter. And this is important for any grant funding, or they want to make sure that you're in accordance with government auditing standards. So this is where we detail if we found any observations. We did note 6 observations. 1 was of a significant deficiency, and the other 5 were other matters that we just need to bring to attention. Obviously, the significant deficiency is something of more importance, and which is in the process of being addressed. The details of all the observations start on page 6. As usual, we list the observation with management's response included in there to show what the corrective action plan is going to be. There's 6 of those, and then we also list the status of any prior year observations that we had. And we list the status of implemented or not. Obviously, if they haven't been implemented, there'll be a repeat observation. I think last year, in the prior year, there was 10 overall observations. This year, there were 6. So that's obviously positive, moving in the right direction. 1 significant deficiency, you did not have any material weaknesses, which would be the worst of all. So significant deficiency is kind of the middle of the road.
So there's
There's 3 kinds. So material weakness, which is major. There's a significant deficiency, which is something that the board needs to be aware of. And there's other matters which are more for management, let's say, but it's included in here anyways.
And you had a question here, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just to back up, the formatting on some places it says implemented, but then there's some that doesn't say whether it's implemented or not, and there's a management's response. So does that mean it's implemented, or they're going to, what is that?
So all of the 2013 observations should have a status. Are you noticing some that don't?
Right.
Well, they transitioned to the 2014.
From 2014?
On page 7.
Okay.
She's on 14.
Well, 7.
Last example.
Very good.
So that's the current year recommendations and observations, and all, there's no status there because that's a current.
Right, I see
Yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah,
All right.
only on prior.
All right,
There's a
so-
response.
Yeah, a response.
Okay, so, and what is the main deficiency that you were just talking about?
Oh, the significant is on top of page 6, having to do with inventory.
Oh,
Similar to last year, they've actually implemented part of it, and I believe, or you're hopeful that they're doing the rest of this year. And they were actually close to getting it done by the audit, but some of that didn't happen, so.
what is a journal entry?
So the journal entry is a time when there's an adjustment to the books. Maybe there's a wire that comes in that's not done through a cash receipt, so they've got to book that to the general ledger. Or at the end of the fiscal year, they book compensated leave, employees' time, so they need to adjust the books because they only adjust those once a year usually. Yeah, it's a various things, but those are examples.
Okay, so moving on to page 10. This is last year, right, this is a lack of written accounting policies. So, one of them, it's kind of this hodgepodge of different things in here. It's the last one on the bottom, 213-05. But it does talk about the capital asset policy does not include treatment of contributed capital items. So some of these are very clear cut, like credit card usage, disaster recovery plan, et cetera. So I don't know what the significance is because this is still not implemented. You see what I'm saying?
So you don't see the significance
I
of...
mean, well, you're saying it's not implemented. How important is this? And why, I'm just curious why it hasn't, it's been over a year now.
Right, and then it says it becomes 2013.
dash
Oh,
02.
two? So if you flip back to this year's 2014-02, they're basically telling us we still have to get.
Stay tuned.
And they've created a timeline to implement, I think, most of those. If you look at the bottom of page 6, it does have within a response.
Yeah, remember we had that purchasing policy that we,
Yeah, some
Yeah,
things
but
were
there's
just
other
adopted
things
recently.
thrown in this.
additional policies.
A disaster recovery plan, travel, policies for travel, credit card usage, purchasing, well, that's a purchase. And the capital asset policy, is that part of the, you see where I'm at? I was
Yes.
trying to figure out where the
So they-
the pieces of the puzzle.
They have a capital asset policy.
Right.
They just need to make an additional specification in there to specify what they'll do with the donated capital assets.
And all the other items?
The capital assets or other?
Yeah.
The other recommendation.
Oh, the
Yeah.
other, well, the other recommendations are more, need to develop a policy.
Some, and some have, or have been in progress, so
Uh-huh.
the expense and travel reimbursement, that's in a pending policy draft that has just been held up due to the review process internally. The purchasing policy, the board did approve that earlier this fiscal year, it's in place now.
Credit card, we only have one credit card in the district.
Correct, so these are, some of these are in progress and pending, and at least one, like I think the modification to the capital policy has not been started yet, so they're basically in progress. And we've noticed, just as an aside, a couple of these, the ones that, like the travel and expense reimbursement, we've acted in a timely manner to try to get them through, but they've just been taking significantly longer than we expected. When we go in each cycle, and, you know, the staff and the team basically say, okay, ideally, we'd like to have all of the recommendations from that cycle largely done as we go into the next one. And that was our goal from day one, when you guys completed the first audit. We said, okay, let's start chipping away at these, and practical reality, some of them we just have not gotten to complete yet. So others, like the inventory, et cetera, there's been either complete or partial progress on them.
Okay.
You spent a lot of time on that. Your staff is.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, all of these, so, you know, Julie, Julie's not here this evening, but Wendy, Julie, a lot of the line staff were.
The line staff did a tremendous amount of work to do the first stage, which is organizing it.
So we've got work to do clearly, and just as an aside, I think that's beneficial in terms of the consistency of feedback that we're getting, because we're able to track these things pretty clearly in this current cycle that we're in with the audits, so.
So the finance committee went through this pretty good detail.
You looked at the signatures, not on the journal entries, to review that?
Yeah,
Or maybe number 4
I think so, yeah.
on page 7.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's,
You've solved that.
yeah, that's already been implemented.
Yeah, we got it.
Is that just one signature, or they need two?
Well, they should be a preparer and approval reviewer. At least some sort of notification on who prepared it, so initials or
See, those are kind of minor matters. So.
other, yeah, those are other
Not
matters.
very much of anything.
What we did ask you, Derek, was is it difficult to order this? Or is it, you know, I mean, is the information there?
Oh,
You know,
yeah, so the finance department puts together reconciliation for every balance sheet item, which is pretty good. It's more than some other places, I'll tell you that. So the reconciliations that we get that are provided to us is very helpful. So that it actually is probably one of the better places to audit as far as record production.
Any questions from the board or comments or? In other words, the idea is to get a clean audit, right?
Yeah,
You gotta do that.
that's the objective.
What was it, you said there was a different term for that, unqualified?
Unmodified is the new,
Unmodified?
yeah, that's the new
Unmodified.
terminology last year.
So we have an unmodified audit?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And it used to be called unqualified, but now it's called unmodified.
Unmodified. Good. Any other board comments? Any public comments? Okay, so the board,
2013 through 14, as presented here.
Second? Second, okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very
All
much,
right,
Barry.
thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let's do the strategic plan then. Yeah. I think that was what we decided to do. Yeah, that's it. This is, it's dew point, but I can't find it.
16.
It's item 16.
16. Consideration of authorizing the general manager to execute agreement with Dew Point Consulting and DHA for strategic planning services.
Okay, I'll do a quick introduction to this, and then obviously we have the proposed team here this evening as well. So the district has, I think the staff and then certainly the board discussions over the past, going back really at least a year, my time, have been clearly noting the need to begin a strategic planning process for the sanitary district. We've been in a mode for at least, say, the last 2 years where we have been rapidly addressing, fairly immediate needs for the organization in terms of, being regulatory compliance and long-term clearance on the regulatory front, being the financial health of the district, restored, things like that. Very significant progress. And the general, I think, conclusion is that's great. We kind of got the ship righted, and we generally think we're going in the right direction. But it's really made it even more clear that, okay, now that we've sort of done that, what do we want to do to really take advantage of this going forward? The great opportunities the district has in terms of having relative financial stability, a long-term clear regulatory picture of what we need to be doing to stay in compliance with the regional board. We have I think, a fairly well-regarded and actively implemented capital improvement program. But these are each sort of individual pieces at this point that we've pursued. So, and I think the final discussions with the recent board facilitation workshops, again, came to the same conclusion. It's great, we've really achieved a lot, as a team, but now it's a really, really opportune time for the district to take a deep breath, look ahead a couple of years, start to operate and make our decisions and priorities around a comprehensive, plan and set of priorities that have been adopted by the board. They're being actively implemented by the general manager and the staff, and there's some cohesion and consistency and support between all of these efforts that we're taking on. I think, the long list of examples of the big challenges and the decisions that the district is going to have to address over the next couple of years, you're all very familiar with them. The strategic planning process, it won't provide every answer, but it'll provide us some very useful, again, near-term objectives and a 3 to 5 year roadmap to start focusing our efforts. When staff started looking into this, and I've been through several strategic planning efforts at different types of organizations in my professional experience, it was clear, there's a sort of a whole spectrum of approaches that you can take to strategic planning. There's a whole spectrum of levels of resources you can bring, complexity. And I think what we were hearing to varying degrees from the board, and certainly my own professional opinion, was, the district's needs are somewhat unique in some ways and also somewhat consistent with other agencies. We need the plan, but we don't necessarily need a huge team to come in and spend a year or 2 years writing some giant business plan for us that's going to then sit on a shelf. The comments have been made over and over again. We want something that's actionable, that is practical, that's not going to gather dust. These are all the usual pitfalls of strategic plans. So the team that we're recommending is basically a combination of Vivian Housen, DHA Associates, and Rita Jackalone from Dew Point Consulting. And basically, it was happenstance in a good way. We became aware of the work that that these two are able to do together through the facilitation of the CASA Collection Systems of the Future initiative. And that was a very good opportunity for us to sort of see sort of how this particular team works in terms of helping groups go through complicated discussions, reach, decisions, set priorities and so forth. So we've sort of brought to you what we think is a very pragmatic and very high-value approach to just get started and get us 6 or 12 months down the road of strategic planning. It won't be the here-all, end-all. It will be the start of, hopefully, a recurring, regularly revisited process that becomes part of how we, as an agency, do things like adopt budgets, set plans. We're always coming back to updated strategic plans. So the basic approach here is we're looking at about a 6-month process. This is a workshop-driven and very participatory approach is what's being proposed to build with input from the board, from senior staff, and from all levels of the organization, and then bring those together in a coordinated manner. The result is we want to end up with a fairly detailed set of objectives that guide us for the next 24 months approximately, so we can really, really focus on those in the near term, but then have a set of longer term goals and objectives that do take us out at least to that 3 to 5 year horizon. And those are sort of by definition activities that might take us 3 to 5 years to bend the curve and move us in that direction. So these are the long-term things, like the Larkspur landing parcel we were talking about. So that's what's before you. These services are budgeted for this year. We talked about making sure we have resources for strategic plan. And you have the proposal in your package. The one clarification I would make is the way this would be contracted if the board does decide to pursue this, is we will be using just a standard Ross Valley consulting agreement, same thing we always use, same thing we've used for DHA's past work. And just for organizational and contracting simplicity, we would structure it that manner, and they would work as a team under that contract. That would be a contract with DHA. So again, just my main point is we have a very consistent standard contracting mechanism. We're not asking the board to look at anything new as far as contracts. So that's kind of the overview. I'll hand it back to the board, and again, we've got the team here this evening.
Welcome.
Hello.
Some board members.
So I'm just looking at 3 workshops in 1 month. Is there any way, well, anyway, that's just one of my questions. How are we going to do the 3 workshops in 1 month?
My reading of it was that there were different people going to the different workshops.
Yes. So it's not everything.
No, so it's a combination, so the workshop will be board and GM, staff and GM, and then combination board and staff.
Okay.
So not all will be there. So we will be very busy.
So it'll be 2 for us.
Yes, well, and there will be an initial meeting with all of you as well.
A 1 hour individual.
1 hour individual, as well as bringing you together to synthesize those interviews. So that's that first time.
The reason why we have so many workshops close together is because we're trying to hit a May deadline. If you're willing to extend the deadline, then we can spend a little more time between workshops to synthesize that information. But we were trying to meet the May deadline because of your budgeting cycle. And some of the decisions that are made will likely inform the budgeting for next year. So we wanted to get those big decisions out of the way up front.
If we move ahead at the aggressive pace that you suggest, and it becomes too overwhelming, could at that point we slow it down and say, and extend past May?
Yeah, sure. In consultation with your general manager, and strategic planning is not a hard science, so you often uncover and learn things as you go that redirects focus, etc. So if we find that there needs to be extra effort or energy in one direction, we'll focus there, and it may take a little bit more time.
Who would the 6 staff members be?
I just saw that.
Yeah, who would the, which 6?
We haven't talked about staff members yet. It could be more than 6, could be less.
I can think of 4 right off the bat, and then maybe, you know.
So part of the plan-to-plan process, okay, that phase, is that I would be speaking with Greg and with you about who the key staff members are that we want to engage to get feedback from.
Okay. Well, is there anything else from the members?
The money for this is already in the budget. We had it in
Correct.
this year's budget. First thought you said you meant you wanted to get paid this year, and so that's why the budgeting cycle was.
We skipped right to the end,
But
Yeah.
it's a part of the
Okay, and we're not taking, we didn't do RFPs because we're not, it's difficult to do our scope, quite frankly. What is the?
Right, this was, I mean, it's a fairly narrow, focused type of services we're looking for, and I sort of alluded to that in my staff report. You know, you can, again, approach this with all kinds of different levels of resources. They're not mysterious, they're pretty straightforward, the way most entities would come about doing this at a superficial level.
Yeah.
But what you're missing when you just go out and talk to sort of generic third parties and say, you know, if you want to do a strategic plan for us, there's no shortage of companies that will say, sure, we'd love to. But we don't need anyone. I mean, we benefit tremendously by going with a team, I feel, that is already deeply familiar with the district, both from a technical perspective, regulatory, et cetera. And I think we've been active, very active, between myself and John Clark in the Collection Systems of the Future workshop. So a lot of the organizational issues that we're wrestling with, that we've talked about, long-term staffing, O&M, operation and maintenance priorities and standards, a lot of the nuts and bolts issues that we're wrestling with, we've been actively discussing, and those have been the workshops that Rita and Vivian have been facilitating. So it was just I guess what I would call sort of a fortuitous circumstance that we had an apparent team in front of us. It would be a steep learning curve, I guess, as well for to bring in from scratch. But that was the thinking behind going straight to what we think is a highly qualified team.
Okay.
What does DISC stand for?
Yeah, DISC. What is-
So
It's a test.
DISC is a test, and it's a very simple work style indicator test that what it enables, it's really a launching point for discussion. So you take this 20-minute test, and it indicates how you approach decision-making. It informs how you communicate. It informs how you engage. So when you have this tool that provides information, it's a means to engage one another around understanding communication, decision-making, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be very clarifying and as I say, a launching point for looking deeper into it. So what I typically do with the DISC is folks take it, then I sit down with folks and really make sense of it through their own experience, okay? And then because I have that understanding, when I bring a group together, we can engage in a really thoughtful conversation about it. And so oftentimes people walk away saying, wow, I didn't realize that. I thought this about that person, but in fact, now it makes sense.
What does it stand for? Is it an acronym?
So it's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. So
we have to-
I can go further into that.
No, I think it's
That's
fascinating.
enough.
I just have to know
You
what
can
acronyms
you can
stand
certainly
for.
check it out on the
Yeah.
net. Yeah.
It's gonna be open book.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly,
You'll be an open book.
And if I might say, there is no right or wrong profile. It is just
you may find some.
You actually want all of the different profiles on the board. That's what makes a good working team.
It's fascinating.
Well, we certainly all agree we need a strategic plan, And are there any questions from the board?
Well, just a comment, I sat on a board that developed a strategic plan that was going in a direction that the majority of the board wanted, and then the board changed, and that strategic plan went on the shelf, and that was $70,000 down the tubes, down the drain, you might say.
Was it a utility type district or?
No, it was a public service district, not a utility.
Utilities I can see. Okay, any further board questions? Anybody in the comment? Mr. Lamb?
Steve Lamb, San Anselmo. Strategic planning sounds like a good idea, so I support this action. I wonder if the public has any role in any of this work, either as a participant or as an observer.
Good question.
Well, the workshops will be publicly noticed because
Have
they
to
will
be
move
to quorum.
forward. So there's every opportunity there to get involved.
We won't be engaging the public specifically. We won't have one workshop for the public to come and input.
That, it's not in the plan right now to have
Well,
that.
I actually think, I had that similar thought after getting the proposal and reviewing it, and I just filed it away because it kind of reminded me of some of the discussions we've had for different reasons, like with the rates and with, well, obviously like the lateral, where I guess the long and short of it is, I would at least suggest to the board, and maybe it doesn't have to be, we can figure out how best to structure it, whether it's, under the core team services to conduct that workshop, which would probably make sense. But I think certainly if we're not at least just flat out soliciting input, we ought to at least anticipate, I would suggest no less than one, public workshop that at least, at a minimum, at some constructive phase along this whole thing says, hey, here's kind of what we're thinking. Here's what we're seeing as the priorities and so on. What do you think? I mean, we can do it a couple different ways, but I think that the main objective here, and it actually is supported by the 10 attributes framework, that our customers are part of that framework. They're a very important part of it. And we ought to be getting into the habit, I think, of effectively soliciting their input. The strategic planning is a great opportunity to do that. It doesn't have to be anything real elaborate, but I think it's a great idea. I would suggest the board consider it. How we do that is kind of a discussion or a detail, but I think it's something I'm kind of glad you brought it up, Steve. I didn't bring it to the table. I had forgotten that, but I do think it's a very good idea.
Is that attribute 8, community sustainability?
I would suggest if we do that, we add a workshop.
Certainly, we can modify, yeah, if you want to modify.
More workshops.
Well, we don't have there's barely enough time.
No, it's clearly,
Towards the end,
it would clearly be a scope change.
Why don't we reduce the timeline?
Right. But stakeholder involvement is, and your ratepayers or your stakeholders, give them an opportunity to provide input, I think is fantastic. And greater transparency as well. It's part of a larger way to outreach to your ratepayers.
One person would be there.
We offer food.
Where's Dew Point?
So I'm in San Rafael.
Okay,
So I was a Larkspur resident from 1999 to 2002, and then moved up to Sonoma County, and now I'm back in San Rafael. I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm a local.
Good. Board members, any more actually?
Let's go for it.
I'll do the motion since I was the one complaining about it.
You encourage.
2 years, no, actually, I
Encourage
think
you.
3 years. This is a happy day. Okay, what number is it, 16?
16, yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to authorize the general manager to execute agreement with Dew Point Consulting and VHA for strategic planning services in the amount not to exceed $46,000.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thanks for
Thank
hanging
you.
in there.
And we will make a
We'll be in touch.
We'll see you in March.
Okay.
No, it's January.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, before Vivian runs off, and that would bring us up under board member comments. We just went through the second highest flow through Roswell Sanitary system. And I guess one or two minor?
Yeah,
We call it
it's been
5, 10, 20 gallons, what do we call it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact details, but I would say certainly in the scheme of our operations, it was a very minor incident.
So it seems to me what we ought to do is document all these flows. We've got the flow chart from CMSA, we know what we did. We ought to write the regional water quality control board. And just a report on this storm, because this storm is making the papers all over California. And some communities have some huge spills, and we've actually fared quite well. And I think we should point out to the Regional Water Quality Control Board that we believe we fared so well because of the maintenance system that we've instituted for a project shutdown. I think we need to.
Yeah, we were somewhere
Take some
north of
credit
60, 62 mg.
for getting through the storm. And so I was gonna ask Vivian, what does she think about that?
So I think there are two things. One is we do have a January 1st quarterly report that is due, and we're in the middle of preparing that right now, and that would fit into that report very
Okay.
nicely.
Okay.
So I think it should go in there. The other is that if your system did behave that well in this past rain event, then we need to look at that hydraulic model. Because right now, the model is predicting overflows, that maybe it was predicting because the flow monitoring at that time was reflecting what was going on in the system based on the condition of the system. Now the system's cleaner, so flows are going through better, and those predictions may be conservative. And if they are, you're being held to something that
Because, our staff was cleaning all of the siphons.
Yeah, the system's been almost through, almost a second complete cleaning cycle. And so we really, and that's resulted in the removal of, tons of debris. The pump station settings have been improved. And as Vivian was just explaining, I think what we're seeing maybe, and remember, we do know trouble spots, and we have active patrols now during the big storms on those trouble spots, checking key manholes, looking for surcharging, overflowing, et cetera. So we're not just kind of waving our hands saying we think it went really well. There's operational data to support that. The pump station wet wells, we started to lose ground at the very end with 15, not like we've seen in the past, but clearly where there's still an apparent capacity deficiency under the worst storms. But we have a pretty good basis, but again, it sort of raises new questions now because all of those flows that, as Vivian was getting at, basically in the old system conditions, those flows were simply going out via SSOs. We weren't seeing them because they weren't in the system, so to speak. The other thing is, this is the first major storm event that we've had, modern functioning flow meters operational on all of the, or most of the major pump stations. Pump station 12 is one that doesn't have a meter yet. So we've been able to work with the CMSA inflow data and our pump station data to sort of correlate how well the flows are matching up. So we're working just with a much better operational picture than we would have had, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago. At least that's my understanding. It's in some ways it's answered, or it's asked some new questions of us, but it's also definitely confirmed, I think, reasonably, that there's been substantial progress in the reliability of the system. It's coming at a high investment in preventative maintenance right now, but that's the curve we want to start bending through the targeted capital improvements.
Okay.
And from CMSA, 2 weeks ago was a huge storm, not quite as bad as this last one, but a huge storm. 83 million gallons went through CMSA plant. But Jason reported to us that loaded with debris. So with that first big storm, it blew it through the pipes and got it out. So when this big one came, the pipes were fairly clean, I guess, and it came through.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. so we did quite well, but you'll get that written up.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect place to say it the first time, and it shouldn't be the first time. That description, that discussion should be in future reports as well. Great, thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the real agenda now. Standing committee, it's item 10. Standing committees report out.
You guys want to knock out 15?
Yeah. Let's go here, because you have to leave.
Thank you. Well, if we're going to close, I don't have to, but as long as it says close.
Okay, but let's go to 15, which is the last important agenda item. And then we have to do the consent calendar. Consideration of authorizing the general manager to request for proposal for design for engineering service and construction for PS 12 and PS 13. 12 is Bon Air and 13 is Greenbrae. Pump station rehab projects, 15. So this is one of our listed CIP projects, and
Yes, so this is straight out of the IND. It was one of the key projects that was recommended. So pump stations 12 and pump station 13, both pump stations, they're at sort of opposite corners of the Bon Air Shopping Center complex. So the one is back up against the, I guess it would be the west end. By the Wells Fargo. Yeah, by the Wells Fargo Bank. It's tucked all the way back there. It's actually its own parcel. It's kind of hard to see unless you get back there. That's pump station 13. That's our second largest pump station. A very, very key part of the system. It's where, well, there's a whole lot that goes on there hydraulically. I'll leave it at that. It's a very important part of the system. Pump station 12 is a smaller facility. It's at the opposite corner, kind of the northeastern by the Chevron station. It's the ivy-covered, just sort of simple block building there, right up against Sir Francis Drake, but in the parking lot of the shopping center. And those two pump stations pump into the final stretches of force mains that then go in under the freeway and over to the CMSA plant. Both of those pump stations were the highest rated in terms of risk and need for improvements from the INP work. And for both of them, it's a similar set of issues. It really just boils down to they've been in operation for a long time. The electrical and mechanical systems, the odor scrubbing systems, et cetera, are just, they are all at or past their useful lives. So these are substantial overhaul projects. We're not moving the pump stations, we're not pouring new foundations, but if it's not concrete, it's probably getting replaced and improved in these projects. If it's electrical, if it's mechanical, the odor scrubbing systems, improved bypass pumping connections, flow monitoring, SCADA connections. It's just a standard kind of every 10 to 20 years complete update on these pump stations. What you're considering this evening is the authorizing staff to issue the request for proposals. This is our standard capital project process at this point. We're going to issue an RFP for design services. The idea was to package both of these pump stations into one design because it's hopefully much more efficient that way. We also want features and sort of the design philosophy and thinking to be consistent on both pump stations. The subsequent construction, and again, to be clear, that's not what you're authorizing this evening, but when we get there, the design team, the idea is that they can produce these two packages in a way that if we choose to, we can do the construction one at a time. But that this design will produce two sets of plans and specs ready to go, one for pump station 12, one for pump station 13, and then most likely you stagger the construction of those.
does this include construction management? That was like
No, it's just design. We'd come back if we wanted to continue on with SBC at a later time. And construction management would be contracted separately.
Which should be separate.
Right. It would be separate, yeah. That's it. The designs, the budget for this year's capital projects includes the monies for this design. We've we wanted to bring this to the board really 3 or 4 months ago, but it's just been pushed back each time because of the, just more pressing business. Other than our gravity sewer, our annual 5 miles of gravity sewer, this will be the next, really major capital project for the district. Most of you have seen these facilities. I've seen both of them in quite a bit of detail. It was during the IMP and then subsequent visits. It's a much needed project. So we don't have any design team or anything because it's just the RFP, but we do have Randall and myself to answer the questions.
Board members?
The $1,500,000 estimated cost for this, for the contract we would, for this, that's included in the $5,800,000?
Construction cost is.
That would include design, construction management, like ESDC.
Everything, that's everything.
Well, but
That's the best plan.
the 5.8 includes the 1.5 million? I don't think so.
Well, it says,
Am I reading it correctly?
Based on the IMP plan level figures, 5.8 million is the general ballpark figure for these two projects, from design all the way through construction management and the construction effort.
Okay, but, that means that, I looked at that too, and that means that the design is over 20% of
the project is.
Yeah.
project cost.
And we've-
And the rule of thumb is like generally 10%.
Well, not so much for pump stations.
Okay.
And we did talk about this, and Randall and others did some research on recent projects. For pump stations, and particularly for retrofits,
Gotta keep them going.
they tend to be, as a percentage of construction, your upfront design fees tend to be higher
Okay.
versus your linear, in-the-street projects, the pipeline type projects. There's a bunch of reasons for that. If you're building a brand new pump station from a blank slate, so to speak, typically your percentages tend to be lower. But the retrofits, they always raise challenges, because you're trying to work within the confines of
Gotta
the
keep them
building.
going.
And so the recent projects that we looked at, and Randall can speak to this in more detail, they ranged from 20 to 30%, some even slightly north of 30% as a percentage of construction for all of the design and supporting services. So it is a notable difference. It's high.
So even when there's two, they're not designing, when they're designing two, are they going to be designed the same, or?
Well, they're completely different facilities, to be clear, but we want a lot of the features and the design standards and everything to be
And
the
maybe
same.
the pump manufacturer.
Yeah, ideally, you spec out consistent equipment, so if it needs spare parts, they're not different. But they are very different facilities. Pump Station 12 is quite a bit smaller. Anyway, that's.
How are we going to advertise these? How are we going to, last time we only got 1 or 2
We only
bids.
got one bid.
And one bid, I mean.
Yeah, so pump stations are a different animal. I mean, they bring different types of design service firms to the table. Your large firms, you're kind of the standard 6 or 7 that we always send proposals to, or RFPs to, I should say. Any of them will do large pump stations like this, under the right circumstances. We will, I guess the answer to your question, Frank, is as far as we will advertise and circulate in all of our usual places. So all of the, Randall, you want to?
We'll host it on the district website. We will also host it on eBid board, building exchanges and plan rooms. We'll canvass the entire list of the over a dozen consultants that are on the consultant direct mail out list. And again, the information will be widely available to anyone who was interested in a project, and go to any industry standard website to find it for free.
You'd probably be looking at, at least based on the current practices, you're probably looking at, north of 8 to 10 firms that at least receive the RFP, and if they decide to propose.
CMSA gets some pretty good results once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Projects.
We've got to use their list.
Yeah, a lot of the same companies, HDR, Brown and Caldwell, Corollo, these are the same folks that we've submitted to.
We're Corolla right now, we just.
Okay, let's see. Can we apply for SRF loans on these? These are kind of the type of projects.
We can in general, Tom, and then, you know, I think that the SRF loan question applies to for the entire capital programs. You know, we can start getting.
Big projects are good, and if we get our first one, which requires Sanitary, we
Yeah,
can start getting them easier.
right.
That's why I'd like us to
Yeah.
apply for, state revolving fund loans are under 2% now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we can go 25 years.
Oh.
So, and then the other question I have is, are we gonna do SCADA,
Yes.
CMSA?
Well, we want to figure out what we're doing with SCADA. We've talked with CMSA about the importance of making sure whatever we do on our facilities integrates readily with the plant. We had that in the past to limited degrees. In other words, we had rudimentary SCADA and it communicated to their plant. That, you know, got disrupted over the years. I think we're pretty clear at this point that whatever we build on these two pump stations for SCADA and pump station 15, all the majors, they should be relatively seamless with the CMSA SCADA system. Yeah, I think that's a design and service goal we have for the pump stations going forward.
Will 12 get a flow meter out of this?
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure, Frank. And the only reason we didn't do one now is because we're already pretty sure that the way the piping is configured in 12, it's gonna all get torn out, yeah.
Yeah, the other question I had was, well, of course, I want you to save all the ivy on the. That's one. And
I'm hoping
two,
we
it seemed to me the scheduling was pretty tight. I had it over here somewhere.
I bet people are gonna scream if the IV's done like, oh.
Probably will.
Proposal submitted by January. Anyway, you'll figure out that
We
schedule.
will figure out the schedule,
Yeah, okay.
for something reasonable.
So how long do they have to get a
Well, it was in the
To do a
January.
design?
time period?
What was our estimated time period, yeah? Offhand,
Bid
I believe it was
16.
approximately a 3-month period for PS 12 and a much longer period for PS 13 Green Bay. And so we're going to define the schedule.
My question is, how much, once you put the those out, how much time will they have to prepare their?
Oh, the proposals,
Well, see, that's what I was asking. Yeah.
Okay, I
Just so enough
misunderstood.
time.
I misunderstood.
It's on it's on page 50.
After the,
Oh, yeah, that should be
that
sufficient.
should be more than that.
We're looking at 3 to 4 weeks after initial posting.
You think that's good enough?
That's pretty standard, yeah. I mean, I would
Because
consider
this is
that,
complicated, I think.
yes. And we want people who are interested to, you know, ideally come look at them. If they're serious about it, take a good look at the facilities.
Okay.
So if we have an extra week, do we get more
Well, that's
interested
what I was.
takers?
You know, it's
How
hard
can
to
we-
say. The companies, this is all very general, and Charlie could probably speak better to this. I mean, you tend to make you're tracking these things, you make a decision pretty quickly whether you're gonna go, no go. Get a team together for the proposal development. You know, 4 weeks lead time is pretty standard. Doing proposals is always a fire drill for consulting engineers.
It's over Christmas. That's
Yeah, that's just
what
how it is. We can certainly adjust the timing to make sure we get maximum response. I know there's concerns about that. Randall, do you have any comments or thoughts? I mean, I forget the exact details, but for example, do we want to make sure we post at a time that minimizes the overlap with the holidays?
Well, you're saying
Yes.
mandatory site visits this month, is that gonna
We
happen?
can.
We will adjust the schedule
Yeah.
accordingly.
This time of year is a.
New Year's
This is a
Eve,
draft
no one's gonna be checking to see how many bids are out there.
Right.
Okay, so we can shift this. What it will do is, I think, well, it depends if we can adjust some of the other steps. It might take us out 1 more month in terms of bringing you back, you know, a recommended design team contract, but I think it's important to get a thorough response on this. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Okay, well, I think we all agree we gotta do this, and we want to do this.
I'll motion. Find it.
Just on
I would so move that we authorize general manager to issue a request for proposal for design and engineering services during construction of pump station 12 Bon Air and pump station 13 Green Bay rehabilitation projects.
I
Second.
And second. So it's moved and second. Any further questions?
Excuse me.
I just have a
I'm
question.
sorry. Yeah, that's right.
Will this work involve disruptions to traffic or parking? Or will it be minimal?
It will generally be, when they're doing construction on both of these, I suspect that the immediate area around the parking lot would have some temporarily closed off areas for sure. Travel ways like Sir Francis Drake and so on, I don't envision any impact, yeah. Should be minimal. Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it carries. Good. So we've done 15, 14, 15, 16, 17. Standing committees report out. Standing committees being, we really heard from the Larkspur Land Team. We've done almost all of the Finance Committee, which was the audit, and the HR Committee.
I can report out on that. We talked with Sophia and Greg about their efforts to identify a labor negotiator for us, and they will be bringing that before the board
January.
next month. We talked about that Sophia has helped transition our occupational medicine treatment from one group to another because the return to work orders were overly vague. It would just say if somebody had been to the occupational medicine group, the return to work orders would just say limited duties or light duties or something. And so RGS was familiar with the Post Street Occupational Medicine Group, which provides more specific return to work orders that will help us reduce our workers' comp liabilities going forward. They've also engaged us with a small online job application system that is actually a JPA itself called CalOps that we will be able to recruit and accept applications for our RVSD staff positions through. I think those were the highlights, but.
Okay, thank you.
A question? Any estimated cost on the labor negotiator?
Really super ballpark. Am I?
The only thing I would say is that they've chosen a person who they intend to bring forward who is not an attorney and therefore is not as expensive as us.
Who's chosen?
Right.
I'm sorry, they have, they're preparing to recommend. That's my misstatement.
So
the labor, so the general choice a lot of places have is, do you want to do an attorney negotiator or non-attorney? The recommendations we've been getting, which I think makes sense, are, there's a handful of public agency labor negotiators, they're non-attorney negotiators that are generally preferable, so that was sort of the approach. We've talked to a couple different potential negotiators. It's a very small field for this group we're talking about, and we've considered a range. To get to your question, Frank, I think the ballpark numbers, and I emphasize the general nature of these, is you're probably looking at somewhere in the like $30,000 to $50,000 over the course of the negotiations. That's highly dependent on the complexity, the time, support staff requirements, and so forth. Having a labor negotiator will be, I think, a significant change for this agency. It is generally standard practice in many public agencies and cities. As I think I've communicated to the board, the reason we're pursuing this for sure to bring to your consideration is I could not begin to recommend that we ever entered into labor negotiations without a professional labor negotiator. And I've done it with and without, and it's no question it's what we need. So we'll bring you back the options and recommendation. We've had phone interviews with a couple of people, just really trying to get a sense of who's available, because also see right now is the cycle of demand for the labor negotiations tends to wax and wane with the with the contract terms around the state for all your big unions. And so we're in a fairly favorable location right now in terms of that cycle, but people get basically snapped up quickly once the tide sort of turns. So, yeah, it's some extra information on what you asked, right? But 30 to 50 is a good ballpark.
Wouldn't it be good if if this whole area kind of used the same, are the other districts getting a?
Well, the one, CSA had a long relationship with, as I understand it, with an outfit out of San Francisco. It's IEDA, and probably, it's something to that effect, and I forget what the acronym stands for. But that's who they've used. They are an option that we've considered, and Sophia is not here this evening to kind of speak to some of those trade-offs. I've never done work with them, but they were an option we've considered, I'll put it that way.
I thought CMSA just had some there.
They did, that's what I was referring to. They've used the same agency over and over again, and again, I think it's IEDA, and they are public agency focused. I believe they're based in San Francisco, but that's about all I know.
I think we're in Sonoma, we had a lawyer.
Did you? Yeah.
Did he do a good job?
She, I guess she did a good job, it was a pretty expensive contract.
But boy, think about how important it is, because salaries for 3 to 5 years, and these salaries are.
And the big issues are retirement costs and PERS and
exactly.
and what percent, who's paying what percent, et cetera.
I think the one party that we're in, just general communication with to see what types of contract terms and so on they would be looking at. From the phone interview, and we're doing more background sort of checking, so to speak. You're going to have an opportunity to work with some really, really experienced, people on this, so that hopefully will put us in a good starting position.
Okay, thank you, I think that's done. Let's go to consent calendar. Does anybody want we did get an email from Greg today, and I really kind of concur. If we've got minor questions with items on the consent calendar, it would be best, like what the check is and things like that, it would be best to contact Greg and get the question answered yourself. If you're not satisfied, then bring it to the board. But, we spend a lot of time on this consent calendar, and I think we've got a lot more important things. But anyway, notwithstanding my obligation, does anybody want to pull things from the consent calendar?
No. Gee, I've got a couple of corrections or changes or additions.
See, you can, in the minutes and things like that.
In the minutes, yeah.
But you can email those to Greg, and then you can get them in.
Well, that's not gonna solve anything, because the board's gonna have to hear what they are.
Okay, well, that's,
That's.
so which one would you like to?
Well, we can just talk about a couple of them and not pull them.
Okay, that's
If we can correct them without making a big deal.
So,
Like the first set of minutes.
okay, October 22nd, that would be 11A, is that right?
Yes, October 22nd, 11/8, right, yeah. So I would just look at, it's really kind of, this one that I have here, on page, in page 3 of 7, up top. It ends by saying, GM clarified the board, that staff will focus on items 1 through 3 in staff report, and the district will be conducting in-person meetings, et cetera. And then bring the information back to Washington Planning Committee and full board. There was actually a motion, a second, that directed the staff to do 1 through 3. At one point, it was going to be 1 through 4, which meant preparing an agreement. So I think the motion, the second, should show up there to authorize staff to carry out items 1 through 3 of the recommendation. I think there were like 9, was there 9?
Yeah, there's 9 proposed, yeah.
9 proposed, yeah, that's all.
Okay.
And that's right, you're right.
And I passed unanimously, whoever was here, everybody voted for it. Then, on the next page, regard to preliminary results of saltwater intrusion study, the scope of the study was simply to find areas close to the bay that might have saltwater intrusion. They used several conductivity and temperature meters, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't mention specifically the 2 areas that they did mention. They mentioned Larkspur Boardwalk and Larkspur Marina. And I think we'll have a reference to Larkspur Boardwalk and Larkspur Marina in the minutes.
Okay.
If we can get it right out of the stack, whatever they said at the meeting, that they specifically mentioned those 2 locations. And that should be in the minutes. And that's all on that one. And so, I don't know if anybody else has any comments on this, but I'll just make those 2 on this set of minutes. On the rest of the consent, I just had I had a question on page 3 of 8, now I'm on 11C.
Okay.
11C, 3 of 8, just a question. On C, it says, C was higher because of Turner Building vandalized water pipe.
Yeah.
I don't know what, we've never heard about that, so
What
I thought I
happened?
would ask.
Yeah. Somebody came along and stole the backflow prevention device.
Brass.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, it happens every once, we assume that's what it was. So it comes up out of the ground in that planter area by the sidewalk. And you see these all around, they come up, go down, they go back, they came in and stole that whole thing.
Was it brass or
I'm not
copper?
sure, I think they're typically brass, they're very expensive plumbing fixtures, they're not cheap. I know that from buying them in my old district. So, yeah, they're worth a lot of money if someone chooses to treat them in that manner. We found out, I think, from coming in and having a fountain of water blowing up where they had stolen it. So, yeah, that's what happened. We've got it taken care of and replaced, but it was unfortunate.
Put a little concrete.
Do we know how much water? There's a lot of water.
Oh, I don't know, Frank, yeah, it didn't go on for more than, literally overnight, because it happened sometime, if I'm not mistaken, it was a weekday. We came in, it happened like between end of business hours and the next morning. So, we'll, at some point, we'll get our energy water bill, I guess, if we see a big change, we'll have to resolve that with them. But, yeah, unfortunate.
And it may affect your bill because it's in the months really
Okay.
measured, right?
Right, so I'll make a motion to, now, are you done, Frank?
Well, one more question. Now I'm on the check register 2 of 6. And liability loss reserve, item number 85. We paid out 10,000. Is that part of a self-insured claim
Yes.
that we paid?
That would be, I believe that is correct. Wendy, can you speak to that?
And it must have been a backup or something.
Yes.
This is, I'm sorry.
Well, it was some sort of property damage. Usually it is from a backup. So that's under our deductible.
Okay. And while we're on that page, a question. Are we self-insured with Delta Dental?
Self-insured,
No,
we use.
We are part of the county's Delta Dental Group.
Okay. So, do we just do direct pay, or is it direct billing here, or we pay?
We pay dental insurance.
We pay dental insurance, an insurance premium to Delta Dental
It's under every month.
Okay.
every month.
You see, I propose that like these questions are good, but if we could email them, and then we could just present the questions to the board, we could say, I'll approve it, but I've had these comments. You see what I mean? It could really speed this up. I mean, it's interesting, I've gone through every single check, and I guess get to ask, but
Well, it looks like we're paying, are we paying for different employee groups? Is that how, like it says?
Oh, I
I'm
see,
just
yeah.
trying to figure it out. Pumps, line management, maintenance, repair?
Yeah, those are
engineering?
different employee groups, Frank, so you'll see a number of areas where the costs are broken out into those different groupings.
We pay one Delta dental bill every month,
Uh-huh.
and the premiums for the employees are assigned and expensed off to the departments to which they're assigned, so they're,
That's how we end up with these numbers this way.
Yeah.
yes,
Okay, okay. That's all.
yes, that's how we keep track of our expenses, to be able to know which department costs us what to operate.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
okay, a motion incorporating Frank's changes.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Who was first? Who made the motion?
I motion.
Michael.
Okay, 12 we're not doing.
And it should reflect that no action was taken.
No action is taken on 12. And general manager's report, I think we'll get out of there. Brief general manager.
Very, very brief, you've covered most of what's been keeping me busy. A couple of quick items, we are going to try to reschedule that proposed workshop with the Marin Realtors. We didn't quite get into that, but that's going to be for mid-January. It's actually quite I think a great concept that they initiated a month or two back, and that is the idea of just like a multi-party open house. We might even use this facility, so stay tuned on that. We were going to try to have it occur before the holidays, but when they floated dates to their membership, it was clear that the week or two before Christmas was a bad time to be asking people to come to an open house. So stay tuned on that. We'll get more information out on it. We already talked a bit about the operations. You'll be getting a summary report from me that reflects the input I got from John Clark and others on how the system performed during this series of storms. And other than that, just as a point of clarification, I'm not planning on attending this particular CASA conference coming up in January. I think I've been the last three. I'm gonna say my knowledge then is full for the moment. And but by all means, I'm assuming most of the board gets the CASA Connects newsletters. If you don't, let me know. We can get you on the emailing list. We have.
Do we have to put that on the agenda for boards?
Typically, yeah, for approval to attend, and then also obviously if you need to have any shifts in the board meeting schedule. And that particular one is in January. I've been stepping up my involvement with the JPA managers monthly meetings again. That's been very productive. A lot of good information going back and forth there. And otherwise, it's really back to the business you guys are seeing before you tonight. That's taking up 100% of my time.
Thank you. Verbal report by board members,
Just a quick question on Greg's report. So, you mentioned EPA, the JPA managers. Did you talk at all about the potential restructuring of the debt for the sale of bonds?
Yeah, we did. I mean, Jason brought the same, basically the same staff handouts that have been sent out to the board, outlining the reasons or the ideas behind the restructuring, what the potential options are, what the process would be, and just sought, the general manager's input on, the pros and cons. I sent them a pretty lengthy email response, but the short, we did discuss it, and I know that that's an active topic for everybody right now.
It'll be a more active topic
On
the
the
second week in January, huh, Frank?
Well, but
And
Since we're, involved in litigation and have prevailed in one, in one case, you should probably have our counsel review just what it is, how this restructuring is gonna work, and to be sure that, that the restructuring of the debt with the JPA members is consistent with the direction that we're going with litigation.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does completely, and I think what, I know this is a little bit more inside tonight, but I think we're anticipating a, basically a closed session focused board discussion, so we can all, you guys can provide.
And just so you know, there's a finance committee.
On the 9th, right,
Now they moved it up to the 5th.
of January.
And I told them I don't know if I can make that.
who's the
CMSA, me, Mary, Beth, is it Mary Beth?
Yeah, Mary Beth Bushy.
We're on the finance committee, and I don't know why Hartzell, it can't be 3 of us, it's gotta be only 2 of us on that finance.
They've got 6.
No, there's something,
So we can roll from Greg's report to our report, now the CMSA report. So at the last CMSA meeting, we, Pam and I walked into the meeting planning on voting for their package, and then we asked a couple of questions, and then we did get an email, and then we said, we need a little more time. And so they weren't real happy with it, but we continued the item. It's gonna come back to the board in January. The council, bond council is continuing to work without the approvals, since they wouldn't be getting paid for the work they're doing unless we sell the bonds anyway. So they are moving ahead, without that actual motion from the last meeting. It'll be before us again in January. So hopefully our council can take a look at what they're proposing, so that when we go into the next meeting, we'll have something more specific.
You're talking about restructuring, and all they're doing is refinancing. They're not changing any payment schemes.
Well, we don't know that. They're
We
gonna
don't
come
know
up with it. They're gonna come up with it. It's directing, them to look at the mechanism, so. Everything may be fine, I think we just need to dot
Okay,
the
just
i's,
send it
cross
here.
the t's here,
yeah.
that's all. That's my.
Okay, I think we adjourn.